The universe is vast beyond imagination. Trillions of stars shine in billions of galaxies, and many of those stars have planets circling them. The numbers are so large that it feels almost certain we shouldn't be alone. And yet, when we look up at the night sky, we see only silence. So where is all the other life? To answer that, we have to look closely at how life began on Earth, the long and unlikely steps it took to reach intelligence, and what that means for the chances of it happening somewhere else. Let's follow the story from the first spark of chemistry through to the search for alien worlds and the mystery of the Fermi Paradox. The prebiotic puzzle. How did chemistry learn to copy itself? The story of life begins not with creatures, plants, or even cells, but with chemistry. Long before the first microbe lived on Earth, there were only molecules moving in water, colliding, splitting apart, and sometimes joining together. Most of the time, these interactions were random, driven by nothing more than chance and the energy in the environment. Yet, out of this soup of reactions, something extraordinary happened. Some molecules gained the ability to make copies of themselves. That moment marked a turning point in the history of the planet. From it, the long chain of evolution could begin. How could chemistry, which normally follows blind rules, cross into something more like biology? For life to exist, molecules had to find a way not just to form, but to preserve their patterns and pass them on. Replication was the secret that changed the game. Without it, every spark of complexity would have faded away as soon as it appeared. With it, there was continuity, and with continuity came the chance for improvement. One of the leading ideas in explaining this puzzle is the RNA world hypothesis. RNA is a close cousin of DNA, and it plays many roles inside living cells today. It carries instructions, helps build proteins, and can even fold into shapes that act like tiny tools. This makes it unusual because it can both store information and perform work. The theory suggests that long before DNA and proteins took over, RNA molecules may have been at the center of the first living systems. They might have been able to copy themselves, or at least parts of themselves, and in doing so, they became the foundation for life. Experiments have given this idea some weight. In the 1980s, scientists discovered that certain RNA molecules, called ribozymes, can act as catalysts. Instead of being passive carriers of information, they could actually speed up reactions, much like proteins do today. This was a surprise, because for a long time it was believed only proteins had that ability. If RNA could both hold a record of its sequence and help assemble copies, it seemed a natural candidate for the first replicators. But the RNA world hypothesis is not without problems. One major issue is the difficulty of building RNA molecules in the first place. RNA is made of smaller parts called nucleotides, and forming those nucleotides in prebiotic conditions is not straightforward. Even if they did appear, linking them into long strands is another challenge. In laboratory settings, scientists have managed to coax RNA molecules into forming and even replicating pieces of themselves, but a fully self-sufficient cycle remains out of reach. Critics argue that while RNA might explain part of the story, it may not have been the starting point. One idea is that before RNA, there were simpler molecules that could also copy themselves. Some researchers propose that small chains of peptides, short proteins, may have played this role. Unlike RNA, peptides can form more easily under early Earth conditions, especially near volcanic vents or in drying pools. If these molecules could arrange into repeating patterns and encourage their own production, they might have provided a stepping stone toward more complex systems like RNA and DNA. Another possibility is that the first replicating systems were not single molecules at all, but networks of chemical reactions. Instead of one strand of RNA carrying everything needed, there could have been groups of molecules that helped each other reproduce. This is known as the metabolism first idea. In this view, self-replication was not a single event, but an emergent property of a web of chemistry. If certain reactions created molecules that fueled other reactions in a cycle, then the system as a whole could sustain itself. Over time, these networks may have become more stable and eventually given rise to information-carrying molecules like RNA. On early Earth, minerals like clays could have provided structured surfaces where molecules lined up in orderly ways. If certain patterns of molecules stuck to a surface and new molecules attached in the same sequence, this could have been an early form of copying. The mineral itself would not replicate, but it would serve as a template, helping chemistry move in a more organized direction. Replication is not only about making copies. It is about making copies that preserve enough information to allow stability, while also allowing small changes that open the door to evolution. If early molecules could replicate, even imperfectly, then those that did it better would slowly become more common. This pressure toward improvement is the very beginning of Darwinian evolution, long before cells or genes existed. The prebiotic puzzle remains unsolved because evidence is scarce. The traces of those earliest molecules have long vanished. All that is left is indirect hints found in modern life and the results of laboratory experiments. Still, progress continues. Chemists have managed to design synthetic molecules that can copy themselves in a test tube. These artificial systems are far simpler than RNA or proteins, yet they demonstrate that self-replication is not a miracle. It is a process that can arise from chemistry under the right conditions. Perhaps molecules did not leap directly into perfect self-copying, but stumbled into it through many smaller steps. A fragment that could sometimes help itself reassemble, a surface that favored repeating patterns, a network of reactions that reinforced itself. Each of these could have added a layer of persistence until one day a molecule, or a set of molecules, crossed the threshold into something that could truly be called alive. If replication is a natural outcome of chemistry under the right conditions, then life may not be rare. On the other hand, if the path to replication was a long chain of unlikely events, then life may be far more precious and fragile than we realize. The leap to the first membrane, containing life's chaos. Once the mystery of replication had begun to unfold, another problem stood in the way of life. Even if molecules could copy themselves, they were still exposed to the raw forces of their environment. The early Earth was not a gentle place. Waves, heat, lightning, and radiation were constantly breaking apart delicate structures. Molecules floating freely in the oceans had little chance of holding together long enough to become anything more complex. To survive, they needed a form of shelter. This is where the story of membranes begins, and why the rise of small protective bubbles may have been just as important as replication itself. A membrane is a boundary. Today, every living cell has one, built mostly from molecules called lipids. These lipids are unusual because they have two distinct sides, one part that loves water and another that avoids it. When many lipids gather in water, they arrange themselves so that the water-loving sides face outward and the water-avoiding sides face inward. This spontaneous arrangement creates a double layer that closes into a bubble. The result is a vesicle, a tiny flexible pocket that can trap molecules inside while keeping the outside world at bay. No designer is needed for this. It is simply how lipids behave under the right conditions. The leap from free-floating molecules to those sheltered within a bubble marked a new stage in the path to life. Inside these vesicles, chemistry could take place in relative safety. Instead of being scattered by waves or destroyed by outside energy, the molecules inside had a chance to persist and interact. These compartments provided stability and identity. A bubble of lipids containing a unique mix of molecules could now be seen as a unit. Laboratory experiments have shown that such lipid bubbles form easily under simple conditions. When scientists mix fatty acids or related molecules in water, vesicles appear almost automatically. On early Earth, fatty acids could have come from many sources, such as reactions near hydrothermal vents or even chemical delivery from meteorites. Some studies have found that meteorites contain lipid-like compounds, suggesting that the ingredients for membranes may have arrived from space. Whether formed on Earth or delivered from beyond, these lipids had the remarkable property of self-assembly, creating compartments without any guiding hand. The importance of this cannot be overstated. For life to progress, molecules needed both protection and concentration. A dilute soup of chemistry spread across the oceans would never have achieved the complexity of life. By trapping molecules inside, vesicles solved the problem of dilution. Reactions that were rare in open water became more frequent within a confined space. A single bubble might capture RNA fragments, amino acids, and minerals all at once, giving them a stage to interact. In this way, the membrane acted as a tool for bringing ingredients together. Another striking feature of these primitive membranes is their ability to grow and divide. Fatty acid vesicles can expand when more lipids are available in the environment. If shaken or stretched, they can split into two smaller bubbles, each carrying some of the contents of the original. This simple physical process foreshadows what cells do today when they divide. In the beginning, there was no need for complex machinery. The physics of membranes allowed for a primitive form of reproduction at the level of the bubble itself. Imagine a vesicle that happens to trap a strand of RNA with some catalytic ability. Inside the bubble, that RNA can help make more of itself or aid in building useful molecules. If the vesicle divides, the new bubbles carry copies of the RNA along with them. Over time, vesicles containing more effective RNA would naturally become more common. This coupling of molecules and their container is a key step in moving from loose chemistry to organized life. The idea that membranes played this central role is supported by ongoing research into protocells, laboratory models of what the first living compartments might have looked like. Scientists have built simple vesicles that can trap RNA strands, allow small nutrients to pass through, and even undergo cycles of growth and division. These protocells are not alive in the full sense, but they provide a glimpse of how life could have started. Each one is a microcosm, a test tube within a test tube, showing how chemistry becomes more than the sum of its parts when it is contained. There are still debates about what the first membranes were made of. Modern cells use complex phospholipids, which may have been too difficult to form on the early Earth. Simpler fatty acids are more likely candidates. They have the advantage of forming vesicles under a wide range of conditions, but they are also fragile. High salt concentrations or extreme heat can break them apart. This suggests that early life may have been restricted to environments where membranes could survive, such as freshwater pools or protected shorelines, rather than the open ocean. The choice of habitat would have been dictated not by preference, but by chemistry. For life to progress, molecules needed to get in and out. A bubble sealed too tightly would trap its contents forever, while one too loose would fall apart. Fatty acid vesicles seem to strike a balance. They can allow small molecules, like nucleotides or ions, to pass through while keeping larger molecules inside. This permeability could have made early protocells surprisingly dynamic. Nutrients could flow in, waste could flow out, and the chemistry inside could continue to evolve. Some researchers suggest that the very surface of a membrane could have acted as a reaction site. Molecules attached to the lipids might have been held in specific orientations, making it easier for them to react. In this way, the membrane was not just a container but an active participant in early chemistry. As protocells became more complex, the partnership between membranes and replicating molecules may have deepened. Strands of RNA that helped stabilize the membrane or promote its growth would have been favored. Likewise, vesicles that carried helpful RNA would have had better chances of surviving and dividing. This coevolution between the container and its contents could have driven the first steps toward true cells. The chaos of early Earth was not eliminated, but it was channeled into tiny safe zones where life could experiment with itself. Out of countless bubbles, most fleeting and fragile, a few may have carried the seeds of something enduring. To this day, every living cell carries the memory of this breakthrough. Our own membranes, with their complex proteins and channels, are direct descendants of those first simple bubbles. Harnessing gradients to power life. Without a steady stream of power, even the most promising protocell would have been little more than a temporary structure, collapsing as soon as its parts wore out. Life, from its very beginning, depended on finding ways to capture energy and turn it into useful work. Energy on the young Earth came in many forms. Sunlight poured down from above, though the atmosphere then was different from today, letting through more ultraviolet radiation. Beneath the oceans, volcanic activity churned out heat and chemicals, creating an ever-shifting chemistry at the seabed. Lightning storms split apart molecules in the air, creating new ones. These were raw sources of power. What life had to discover was how to take these uncontrolled forces and use them in a structured way. The bridge between chaos and order was built on gradients, differences in energy from one place to another. A gradient meant that energy was not evenly spread out, and it could be tapped by any system clever enough, or lucky enough, to use it. One of the most compelling settings where this could have taken place was near hydrothermal vents at the bottom of the ocean. These vents, powered by volcanic heat, spew out water rich in minerals and chemicals. Around them, there are steep gradients in temperature and chemistry. Hot water meets cold seawater. Acidic fluids meet alkaline ones. The walls of the vents themselves contain minerals that can act like natural catalysts. In such an environment, early protocells may have found both shelter and energy. Alkaline hydrothermal vents, in particular, have been highlighted as natural laboratories for the origin of life. Unlike the black smokers that release scalding acidic fluids, these vents release cooler alkaline water. The chimneys that form around them are filled with tiny pores lined with minerals such as iron and nickel compounds. These pores create natural compartments, not unlike primitive membranes. More importantly, they set up sharp chemical gradients. The inside of the vent fluid was highly alkaline, while the surrounding ocean water was more acidic. Across these tiny walls, there existed a natural difference in proton concentration, a proton gradient. Modern life still runs on proton gradients. Every living cell, from bacteria to humans, relies on membranes that pump protons from one side to the other. The difference in concentration across the membrane is then used to generate energy in the form of molecules like ATP, which act as the cell's currency of energy. The fact that life today still depends on this system hints at its deep roots. In the vents, the gradient already existed. Primitive chemistry might have used it long before cells evolved their own proton pumps. The vent pores could have acted like ready-made batteries, offering the first sparks of usable energy. Before the rise of oxygen in the atmosphere, sunlight was harsher, especially in the ultraviolet range. To us, this seems destructive, but it may also have been useful. Ultraviolet light has enough energy to break chemical bonds, which can drive reactions that would not normally occur. Experiments have shown that ultraviolet light can help form nucleotides, amino acids, and other building blocks of life. It could have served as both a danger and a tool, breaking down fragile molecules while also assembling new ones. Early protocells, if they found ways to withstand or filter the light, may have tapped into this raw energy source to fuel their own chemistry. It is possible that different protocells explored different energy strategies. Some may have lingered near vents, using proton gradients and minerals to drive their chemistry. Others may have relied on sunlight, harnessing light-driven reactions near the surface. Over time, those that found more stable or efficient energy sources would have been favored. The competition for energy may have been the first great evolutionary pressure. To grow larger, to copy information more reliably, or to form stronger membranes, protocells needed more energy than simple diffusion could provide. Once a system found a way to consistently channel energy, it could outpace its neighbors. The emergence of energy harnessing may have been the dividing line between fragile chemical accidents and the first true ancestors of life. In cells today, energy often comes from moving electrons from one molecule to another. In respiration, for example, electrons are passed along chains of proteins, releasing energy step by step. Minerals such as iron and sulfur could have provided primitive versions of these chains on the early Earth. The flow of electrons across mineral surfaces, coupled with natural gradients, may have powered the earliest biochemical cycles. This deep connection between geology and biology suggests that life's first engines were not invented from scratch, but borrowed directly from the planet. Earth already had systems that moved energy, whether in vent gradients, sunlight, or mineral reactions. Life's task was to capture those flows and trap them within membranes. Once trapped, energy could be used in controlled ways, linking nucleotides into RNA strands, bonding amino acids into peptides, or strengthening the lipid membranes themselves. Energy turned fleeting chemistry into durable processes. On icy moons like Europa or Enceladus, hydrothermal vents may exist beneath thick shells of ice. If gradients are the key, then similar processes could be occurring there today, potentially giving rise to life or sustaining it if it already exists. Likewise, sunlight-driven chemistry may play a role on planets closer to their stars. Wherever there is a source of energy combined with chemistry and compartments, the recipe for life may not be far behind. In the earliest stages, energy was probably messy, unreliable, and sometimes destructive, but protocells that could channel it even slightly had an edge. Over countless generations, these edge cases became the rule. Simple cycles gave rise to more complex ones. What began as a reliance on natural gradients eventually turned into the finely tuned energy systems we see in life today. The oxygen revolution that nearly killed life. For hundreds of millions of years after life first appeared, the planet was a very different place. The oceans were filled with simple cells that lived in a world without oxygen. To them, oxygen was not the breath of life, but a poison. The atmosphere was made mostly of gases like methane, carbon dioxide, and nitrogen. Early life found ways to survive in this environment using chemical reactions that did not involve oxygen. It was a world of anaerobes, organisms that lived without air. And for a long time, this balance worked. Then, something remarkable and dangerous happened. A new kind of microbe began to harness sunlight in a different way. These microbes, ancestors of what we now call cyanobacteria, discovered how to use water as a source of electrons during photosynthesis. This was an incredible leap in evolution. By pulling electrons from water molecules, they could fuel their own growth and release oxygen as a byproduct. To them, it was a waste gas. At first, the oxygen released by these early photosynthesizers was absorbed by iron and other materials in the oceans. The iron rusted, forming layers of banded iron deposits that can still be seen in rocks today. For millions of years, the oceans quietly filled with oxygen that was locked away in these reactions. But eventually, the sinks were overwhelmed. The iron ran out, and oxygen began to escape into the wider environment. Slowly, the oceans and the atmosphere started to change. For the organisms that had thrived in the old world, this was a catastrophe. Oxygen is a highly reactive gas. It tears apart the delicate bonds inside cells, damaging proteins, nucleic acids, and membranes. To the anaerobes, the rising tide of oxygen was deadly. Whole communities that had flourished for ages were suddenly exposed to a gas they could not tolerate. What had been a thriving biosphere turned into a killing field. This event is known as the Great Oxidation Event, and it nearly ended life before it had a chance to truly spread. The scale of this crisis is hard to imagine. It was not a sudden disaster like a meteor strike, but a slow poisoning that unfolded over millions of years. Wherever oxygen spread, anaerobes either died or were forced into hidden refuges where oxygen could not reach. Deep mud layers, underground pockets, and the bottoms of oceans became safe havens for those who could not adapt. Some scientists believe that during this time, Earth came close to losing much of its biosphere. It was as though the planet itself had turned against the very creatures it had nurtured. And yet, in this crisis, opportunity also appeared. Oxygen, while dangerous, carried with it immense power. Chemical reactions that used oxygen released far more energy than those that did not. Organisms that could find a way to tolerate oxygen or even use it suddenly had access to a new world of possibilities. Evolution, always a game of survival and adaptation, began to explore this new path. The first steps were defensive. Cells developed enzymes and molecules that could neutralize the toxic effects of oxygen. These primitive antioxidants acted like shields, protecting the delicate inner workings of the cell. Over time, these shields became stronger, and some organisms began not just to endure oxygen, but to exploit it. The shift from anaerobic to aerobic metabolism was one of the most profound changes in the history of life. With oxygen, cells could extract far more energy from the same amount of food. This extra energy opened doors to complexity. The rise of aerobic life was a long process of trial and error, with countless failures along the way. But slowly, lineages that mastered oxygen began to outcompete those that could not. The new metabolism allowed cells to grow larger, move faster, and evolve more intricate structures. The stage was being set for the eventual rise of multicellular life, though that was still far in the future. The Great Oxidation event also had a dramatic effect on the planet itself. With oxygen in the air, new chemical cycles began. Methane, once a major greenhouse gas, was destroyed by oxygen, and the Earth cooled. Some researchers think this may have triggered the first great ice ages, when the planet may have been frozen from pole to pole in what is called a snowball Earth. If true, this means that oxygen not only reshaped life, but also reshaped the environment in ways that further challenged survival. Life had to endure not just poison but also ice and darkness. And yet, through all this turmoil, the seeds of the modern biosphere were sown. Oxygen eventually settled into the atmosphere as a permanent feature. New forms of respiration became the standard. Entire ecosystems emerged that were built on the energy oxygen made available. In time, the very gas that once threatened to destroy life became the driver of its greatest expansions. The gas we depend on so completely today was once the cause of near extinction. What we now breathe with ease was once a toxic byproduct that almost erased life from the planet. The survivors of that ancient crisis carried forward the tools to live with oxygen, and their descendants built the complex world we see now. Every breath we take is a reminder of that long-ago disaster and the resilience of the earliest organisms. The story of the oxygen catastrophe is also a reminder that evolution is not a straight line. Progress often comes at a cost. The appearance of one innovation can spell disaster for everything that came before. Cyanobacteria did not set out to poison the world, but by solving their own problem of survival, they created a global shift that forced everything else to change or die. The one-time miracle of eukaryotes? For billions of years after life began, the Earth was home to simple cells. These organisms, the prokaryotes, were small, efficient, and resilient. They filled every environment, from the depths of the oceans to the surface of rocks. But for all their success, they remained simple. Their structure was limited, their size constrained, and their energy budget small. Then, at some point more than 1.5 billion years ago, one simple cell engulfed another. And instead of digestion, a partnership was formed. That union gave rise to the eukaryotes, cells with a nucleus, compartments, and the ability to grow to scales far beyond what had been possible before. Cells had been eating one another for a long time. Engulfing food was not unusual. What was unusual in this case was that the swallowed cell did not die. Instead, it found a way to live inside its host, and the host found a way to benefit from its presence. The swallowed cell became what we now know as the mitochondrion, the tiny power station inside every complex cell. From that moment forward, energy supply changed forever. Mitochondria are remarkable because they take oxygen and food molecules and turn them into far more energy than simple cells could ever generate on their own. This boost in energy allowed eukaryotes to grow larger, build more structures, and support more DNA. It was like stepping from a candle flame to an electric generator. With this newfound power, cells could afford complexity. They could build skeletons of protein inside themselves, create transport systems, and form compartments with specialized roles. The nucleus appeared, giving DNA a safe home and regulating its use. Other compartments evolved too, but at the heart of it all was the mitochondrion. Without this endosymbiosis event, there might never have been multicellular organisms, plants, animals, or humans. Yet what makes it even more remarkable is that it may have happened only once. Despite billions of years and countless opportunities, there is no evidence that such a merger ever occurred more than that single time. Prokaryotes remained abundant, but only one lineage ever made the leap to true complexity through the swallowing and taming of another cell. Why was it so rare? One reason may be that the partnership was almost impossibly delicate. Engulfing another organism usually ends in destruction. To keep the swallowed cell alive would have required an extraordinary balance. The host had to tolerate the intruder, and the intruder had to adapt to life inside another. Even if this balance was struck, it would have had to persist over generations, with both partners reproducing in sync. The fact that it worked at all seems miraculous. The mitochondria themselves give us clues about their origins. They carry their own DNA, distinct from the DNA of the nucleus. This DNA is small and reduced, but it still shows that mitochondria were once independent bacteria. Over time, most of their genes were either lost or transferred to the host cell's nucleus, leaving only a handful behind. They became fully dependent on their host, unable to live on their own. The host, in turn, became dependent on them for energy. What began as two separate beings became one inseparable whole. With energy to spare, eukaryotes expanded into forms that prokaryotes could never reach. Some grew to enormous sizes for single cells, rivaling grains of sand. Others began to work together, forming the first multicellular organisms. Energy-rich cells could support more DNA, which allowed for more proteins, more regulation, and more innovation. From this came the first algae, fungi, plants, and animals. All of the visible complexity of life traces back to that one improbable union. This has led some scientists to wonder whether eukaryotes are a fluke of our planet. If life exists elsewhere in the universe, it may be widespread in the form of simple cells, but the leap to complex cells may be vanishingly rare. The Earth might be unusual, not because it produced life, but because it produced eukaryotes. If the event really was a one-time accident, then intelligent life might be far less common than we imagine. Still, within that single leap, there is a lesson about cooperation. Evolution often focuses on competition, the struggle for survival, and the extinction of the unfit. But the birth of eukaryotes was a story of partnership. Two cells, once independent, joined forces and created something entirely new. The strength of that partnership is seen in every living thing around us today. We are, at the deepest level, symbiotic beings. Every breath we take feeds not just our own cells, but the mitochondria inside them, and in turn, they power our lives. It is also worth noting that mitochondria were not the only symbiotic gift. In plants and algae, another endosymbiotic event occurred later, when a eukaryote swallowed a photosynthetic bacterium. This became the chloroplast, the organelle that captures sunlight and turns it into sugars. Like mitochondria, chloroplasts have their own DNA and a history as independent organisms. This second great union gave rise to the plant kingdom, and with it, the oxygen-rich world we know today. Together, mitochondria and chloroplasts represent two extraordinary mergers that shaped the entire course of life. But the first, the rise of mitochondria, was the foundation. Without it, the second might never have happened. Without that burst of energy, eukaryotes may have remained small and simple, unable to support the complex machinery needed to engulf and maintain yet another partner. This sequence of events, stacked so precariously, highlights just how narrow the path to complex life may have been. With their nuclei and larger genomes, eukaryotes developed sexual reproduction, mixing genes in ways that accelerated diversity. This allowed for faster adaptation and, ultimately, the explosion of forms we see in the fossil record. All of this depended on the energy foundation laid by mitochondria. Looking back, it is humbling to realize that every animal, plant, and fungus shares this same heritage. The rise of eukaryotes was not inevitable. It was a fragile, one-time event that may never have occurred again anywhere else. The silent billion-year gap before complexity emerged. When we imagine the timeline of Earth, it is important to realize just how much of it belongs to microbes. The Earth is around 4.5 billion years old, and for nearly 3 billion of those years, the planet was populated only by bacteria and other simple organisms. Large plants, animals, or even multicellular life did not appear until very late in this story. If Earth's entire history was squeezed into a single calendar year, then for most of it, from January through late November, the planet would have been home only to tiny single-celled creatures. All of the rest, forests, dinosaurs, mammals, and humans, would not arrive until the last month, or even the last week of the year. The first eukaryotic cells, with their internal complexity, may have opened the door to larger life forms, but the leap from single complex cells to organisms made up of many cells working together did not happen right away. Instead, the eukaryotes drifted in Earth's oceans for more than 1 billion years without creating the kind of structured complexity that would eventually lead to animals and plants. Scientists sometimes call this the boring billion, a time when Earth's biology seemed to be waiting for something. One idea to explain this long pause is that the environment was not yet ready. Complex life requires a stable supply of oxygen, not only in the atmosphere but also dissolved in the oceans. If oxygen levels were too low, then larger energy-demanding forms of life would have struggled to survive. Evidence from ancient rocks suggests that oxygen may have risen in steps rather than all at once, with long periods of near stagnation in between. If that is true, then perhaps evolution was simply waiting for the right balance, like a fire that cannot take hold until the fuel is dry enough to burn. Another idea is that the delay had more to do with biology itself than with the environment. The jump from single cells to multicellular life is not a small one. It requires cells to give up their independence and work together as part of a larger whole. This cooperation means some cells must specialize and stop reproducing, serving the needs of the group instead of themselves. In evolutionary terms, that is a big sacrifice, and it may not happen easily. Microbes are excellent survivors on their own, and in many ways, they do not need complexity to thrive. They can reproduce quickly, share genes, and adapt in ways that make them nearly unstoppable. From this view, the long pause was not really a failure to advance, but simply the natural success of life's simplest form. There is also the possibility that life did experiment with complexity during this long gap, but the evidence has been erased. Fossils from that time are rare and hard to interpret, since soft-bodied microbes do not leave behind much of a record. It may be that attempts at multicellularity happened many times, but did not last, wiped out by changing conditions or competition. Only later, when the environment stabilized, did one of these experiments finally succeed and spread across the planet. If Earth's story is typical, then perhaps the universe is full of planets teeming with microbial life, but very few that ever make the leap to complexity. Intelligent life, in that case, would be rare not because life is hard to start, but because complexity is hard to sustain. This idea has been used to explain why, despite the vastness of the cosmos, we have not yet found signs of other civilizations. If billions of years can pass with nothing more than single cells, then the window for complex life might be very narrow indeed. During this silent billion-year gap, Earth itself was not still. Continents drifted, climates shifted, and the chemistry of the oceans changed again and again. Volcanic eruptions poured nutrients into the water, while glaciers scraped the surface of the land. These changes may have influenced the pace of evolution in ways we do not fully understand. It could be that the right combination of nutrients, oxygen, and stability simply took an extraordinarily long time to come together. The rise of algae, for instance, may have been a key turning point, since they could produce oxygen in large amounts and also form the base of more complex food webs. Cambrian explosion. Why complexity suddenly took off. Roughly 540 million years ago, the Earth witnessed a moment of extraordinary transformation. For billions of years before this time, life had been almost invisible to the eye, existing in forms that could only be seen through a microscope. But then, in what seems like the blink of an eye when measured against Earth's vast timeline, the seas erupted with diversity. Creatures with shells, spines, and eyes suddenly appeared. Organisms began burrowing into the sea floor, swimming with coordination, or hunting with mouths and limbs. It was the event later called the Cambrian explosion, a burst of creativity and evolution that filled the oceans with an astonishing variety of forms. The fossils found in formations like the Burgess Shale in Canada and the Chengjiang deposits in China reveal a world that was alive with experiments. There were strange worm-like creatures with spikes, bizarre lobed animals with grasping claws, and the first ancestors of arthropods, mollusks, and vertebrates. Some of these early designs vanished quickly, leaving behind no modern descendants, while others laid the foundation for nearly every major animal group that exists today. The suddenness of this change raises the central question: what triggered it? By the time of the explosion, oxygen may have finally reached thresholds high enough to fuel more demanding metabolisms. Simple microbial life could survive on less, but animals with muscles, nervous systems, and active lifestyles required far more energy. Oxygen provided that spark. With it, cells could extract far more power from food, enabling movement, predation, and defense. Once enough oxygen spread through the oceans, it may have unlocked a new ecological arms race. Another explanation focuses on the genetic machinery inside early organisms. By the Cambrian, many animals had already evolved what scientists call developmental toolkits, sets of genes that control how bodies are built. These included genes that determine where limbs grow, how segments form, or how organs are laid out. They are sometimes referred to as Hox genes, and remarkably, the same families of genes can still be found in animals as different as flies and humans. Before the explosion, these toolkits may have been relatively simple or underused, but during this period they may have undergone expansions, duplications, or changes that allowed for far greater flexibility in body design. With new genetic instructions to draw upon, organisms could evolve eyes, shells, legs, and other features more quickly, trying out body plans that pushed the boundaries of possibility. Around this time, Earth's continents were shifting, sea levels were rising, and shallow seas spread widely across the planet. These environments were perfect laboratories for evolution, nutrient-rich, sunlit, and filled with opportunities. Sediment layers suggest that chemical conditions in the oceans changed too, freeing up nutrients like calcium. Calcium in particular may have been a crucial ingredient, allowing the formation of hard shells and skeletons. Once some creatures developed these protective coverings, others were forced to adapt in response, whether by drilling through shells, outmaneuvering armored prey, or growing larger themselves. Complexity fed on complexity, as every innovation sparked another in an escalating web of competition and survival. Before the Cambrian, life mostly absorbed nutrients from the environment or filtered small particles from the water. But fossils show that during this period, the first true predators emerged, animals capable of attacking, biting, and digesting other organisms. This shifted the rules of survival. Once some creatures became hunters, others had to adapt defenses, whether spines, shells, or the ability to burrow into mud. Predators in turn grew faster and sharper. This arms race may have been one of the key drivers of rapid innovation. Still, despite these ideas, scientists remain cautious. The Cambrian explosion was dramatic, but not entirely instantaneous. Some evidence suggests that the roots of complexity had been building long before, in what is sometimes called the Ediacaran period. Fossils from that earlier era show soft-bodied organisms that were strange and unlike anything alive today. They lacked bones, shells, or clear body parts, but they may have been the first steps toward animals. Some researchers believe the Cambrian explosion wasn't so much a sudden beginning as it was the moment when these earlier experiments finally crystallized into enduring forms. The fossil record from before the Cambrian is sparse, so part of the apparent suddenness may come from gaps in preservation. Soft-bodied creatures rarely fossilize, while shells and skeletons leave lasting records. What makes the Cambrian explosion so captivating is not only the science, but the sense of possibility it conveys. Imagine walking through those seas, trilobites scuttling across the seafloor, strange tentacled forms drifting above, armored worms burrowing beneath the sediment, and predators like Anomalocaris, with its disc-like mouth and grasping appendages gliding through the water. It was a world where evolution experimented wildly, and for once, many of the experiments left their mark in stone. When we look at these fossils, we are looking at the first flowering of complexity, the foundation of the intricate web of life that would follow. If complexity required such a unique convergence of oxygen, genetic innovation, environmental change, and ecological interaction, then perhaps complex life is rare in the universe. But on the other hand, the explosion could suggest that once those conditions are met, complexity is an almost inevitable outcome, that life, when given energy and space, will rush to fill every niche with new forms. From creature to thinker, the narrow path to human intelligence. In the long history of life, intelligence was never guaranteed. For billions of years, creatures lived, adapted, and flourished without the need for advanced thought. Even after the Cambrian explosion unleashed a vast variety of body forms, most animals survived using simple nervous systems and basic sensory tools. Sharp eyes, strong muscles, hard shells, or keen smell were often the difference between life and death. Yet in one small lineage of primates, something shifted. Thought grew deeper, awareness more complex, and eventually the ability to reflect, plan, and imagine transformed survival strategies into something far more profound. Dinosaurs ruled the planet for over 150 million years, and yet they did not develop writing, agriculture, or technology. Insects became the most numerous and successful group of animals on Earth, but their survival depends on instinct-driven behaviors. Even mammals, who evolved complex brains, mostly stopped at levels of awareness suited to their niches. Wolves coordinated hunts, dolphins communicated with clicks and whistles, elephants remembered migration routes. None, however, pushed further into symbolic thought, abstract language, or deliberate culture. For most of life's history, being clever was not the primary currency of survival. Speed, strength, and resilience mattered more. This is why the rise of human intelligence is seen as both extraordinary and puzzling. One idea is that intelligence is simply one solution among many. Natural selection is a branching tree where different features work in different contexts. Birds learned to fly, fish developed gills, and plants invented photosynthesis. Each path works, and none is inherently superior to the others. For humans, intelligence may have been just another adaptation that happened to work well in the particular environment our ancestors faced. Early primates lived in forests, where depth perception, memory of roots, and social awareness were useful. As some groups left the trees and adapted to savanna life, new challenges appeared. Food sources were spread out, predators hunted in open spaces, and cooperation became vital. In this setting, sharper thinking may have been an advantage that slowly reinforced itself. The role of social living is often highlighted. Many animals live in groups, but primates took it to an unusual level of complexity. To survive in a troop required keeping track of allies, rivals, and shifting hierarchies. A brain that could interpret subtle gestures, predict behavior, and manipulate social ties gained an edge. This idea is sometimes called the social brain hypothesis, suggesting that intelligence first grew, not for solving puzzles in the environment, but for solving puzzles within the group. Over time, this mental toolkit could be turned outward, applied to hunting strategies, tool use, and eventually symbolic language. Tools themselves may have been another driving factor. Early hominins, millions of years ago, began shaping stones into cutting edges. At first, these tools were simple and crude, but they extended the body's power, allowing access to new foods like marrow and meat. Making a tool required foresight, memory, and imitation. Passing on the knowledge required communication and teaching. A feedback loop began. Smarter individuals made better tools, and better tools rewarded smarter individuals. Across countless generations, this loop may have pushed brain development forward in ways that were unlikely to happen in species that did not depend so heavily on external objects for survival. Yet intelligence came with costs. A large brain uses enormous amounts of energy. For humans, the brain consumes about 20% of the body's total energy at rest, far more than in most animals. For such a heavy burden to be worth it, the advantages had to outweigh the expense. Our ancestors found themselves in an environment where flexible thinking repeatedly paid off, whether through finding food, organizing hunts, or building alliances. But this may not have been common elsewhere. If the conditions had been only slightly different, if food had been more abundant, predators less threatening, or cooperation less essential, the path toward higher thought might never have been taken. Was human intelligence inevitable or an accident? Some researchers argue that evolution tends to favor complexity when given enough time, suggesting that intelligence could eventually appear on many worlds. Others caution that intelligence is a rare fluke, arising from a stack of unlikely events. The asteroid impact that cleared away the dinosaurs 66 million years ago was one such event. Without it, mammals may have remained small and marginal, never gaining the chance to expand and experiment with new forms of life. The particular climate shifts that shaped African landscapes, the pressures of changing ecosystems, and the peculiarities of primate biology may all have combined in just the right way. Even within our own lineage, the story was fragile. Several species of hominins once shared the Earth, including Homo habilis, Homo erectus, and the Neanderthals. Each showed signs of intelligence, tool use, and social life. Yet only Homo sapiens carried the development further, building symbolic art, organized language, and long-term culture. Why this happened is still debated. Some suggest small genetic changes tipped the balance, making our brains uniquely flexible. Others point to cultural accumulation, the idea that each generation built slightly more knowledge than the last, creating a snowball effect. If that is the case, intelligence may not have been a sudden leap, but the slow layering of ideas over hundreds of thousands of years. Looking across the animal kingdom, we see glimpses of what might have been. Crows can fashion hooks to reach food, octopuses solve puzzles and escape enclosures, dolphins learn tricks and pass them on. These sparks show that intelligence is not unique to humans, but in other creatures it remains bounded. Their environments, lifespans, and ways of life did not demand more. In contrast, humans were pushed into a narrow corner where only flexible thinking, social cooperation, and long-term planning could open survival paths. From that narrow path emerged language, art, and technology, developments that no other species matched. The broader mystery remains: is our kind of intelligence a universal outcome of evolution or a fragile rarity? If it is universal, then the galaxy may hold countless civilizations. If it is rare, then we may be alone, a strange accident on a small planet. What is clear is that intelligence was not the easy road. For billions of years, life managed without it, and even today, most species thrive without building cities or crafting symbols. The path from creature to thinker was narrow, winding, and uncertain. That it happened at all is one of the most remarkable turns in the story of life. From fire to AI, the razor's edge of technological survival. When our distant ancestors first learned to control fire, it changed everything. Fire gave warmth against cold nights, light in the darkness, and a way to cook food that unlocked more energy. But it also brought danger. A spark could burn down an entire camp or forest. Fire could protect, but it could also destroy. That paradox set the stage for all of human technology. Every new tool carried the seeds of both progress and catastrophe. For thousands of years, the mastery of fire remained our greatest achievement. It changed how humans related to the world. Cooking softened food, making it easier to chew and digest, which meant that more nutrients could feed growing brains. This extra fuel allowed for larger, more energy-demanding brains than those of other animals. Fire also extended the day. It gave early humans hours to gather, share stories, and plan. Around the campfire, knowledge passed between generations and memory became culture. As stone tools sharpened, bows and spears appeared, and eventually metal was mastered, humanity began to alter its environment in ways no other species could. Agriculture was one of the most transformative inventions, turning scattered hunter-gatherers into settled communities. Farming fed more people, supported permanent villages, and gave rise to cities. With agriculture came writing, numbers, and the ability to preserve knowledge beyond memory. Written records allowed civilizations to build on the work of generations rather than starting fresh each time. Yet this was fragile. A single fire could erase entire libraries. Civilizations collapsed repeatedly, their knowledge scattered or lost. The climb of technology was never smooth. It lurched forward, stumbled, and sometimes slid backward into centuries of forgetting. Metallurgy, irrigation, and architecture turned human settlements into empires. Iron weapons allowed defense but also conquest. Roads and ships spread trade but also spread disease. The rise of cities created opportunities for collective growth, but also created fragile systems where a single failure, crop failure, invasion, or plague could bring ruin. The Industrial Revolution was perhaps the greatest leap since the discovery of fire. Steam power and engines freed humans from the limits of muscle, wind, and water. Machines could work without rest, multiplying productivity beyond imagination. Coal and later oil unleashed vast energy reserves, transforming societies overnight. With industry came wealth and medicine, but also the first signs that humanity's power might outstrip its wisdom. Electricity lit up the night, powered machines, and carried voices across continents. Radio connected armies and governments, but also spread propaganda. Airplanes shrank the world, making distant places close, but also turned cities into targets during war. Each invention created opportunity, but also risk, and the scale of both grew larger with time. The most striking moment on this razor's edge came in the 20th century, with the splitting of the atom. Nuclear energy offered almost limitless power, a way to fuel entire cities without smoke or coal. Yet the same discovery created weapons capable of ending human civilization in an afternoon. The mushroom cloud became a shadow over progress, a reminder that survival was no longer guaranteed. For the first time, technology had given humans the power to erase themselves completely. The digital revolution brought a different kind of fire. Computers shrank from room-sized machines to devices in pockets, linking billions of people into one vast network. Information could travel across the world in seconds. The internet connected knowledge, culture, and ideas, allowing humanity to think together on a scale never seen before. But it also spread lies, confusion, and division with the same speed. The network empowered and destabilized, made people more connected and more isolated at the same time. Now, artificial intelligence stands as the next frontier. Machines that learn, adapt, and decide are no longer science fiction. They drive cars, write code, diagnose diseases, and simulate human thought. They may cure illnesses, solve climate problems, and help humans reach the stars. But they may also escape control, make decisions we do not understand, and reshape societies in ways beyond prediction. Civilizations have risen and collapsed many times. Entire cultures have disappeared, leaving behind only ruins. The fact that humanity reached the age of rockets and satellites at all seems improbable. A few different choices: a war that burned too hot, a plague that spread too wide, a discovery misused, could have ended the story earlier. The climb was fragile, always threatened by the very tools that helped it. Would alien civilizations face the same razor's edge? Would they too walk the thin line between progress and destruction? Perhaps many worlds saw life grow intelligent, only to fall before reaching the stars. Civilizations might rise like sparks, flare brightly, and then vanish. For humans, survival has depended not only on invention, but on restraint. Fire was useful because it was contained. Nuclear power survived because treaties, fear, and diplomacy kept the worst from happening. AI may follow the same path. It may thrive only if boundaries are carefully drawn and if wisdom grows alongside power. Technology is not only about building, it is about deciding how to live with what has been built. Humans live longer, healthier, and more connected lives than ever before, but the risks are larger than at any point in history. The very tools that carried us here may be the ones that end us, or, if handled carefully, the ones that let us endure far into the future. The Sun's perfect balance, too calm, too active, or just right. Without the Sun, Earth would be nothing more than a frozen rock drifting through space. But what often goes unnoticed is how unusual our Sun really is compared to most other stars in the galaxy. It is not only bright enough and long-lived enough to support life, but also remarkably stable. This balance between activity and calmness has been critical to life's journey, and it may be one of the most overlooked reasons why beings like us exist at all. When astronomers look across the night sky, they see a crowded population of stars that come in many sizes, colors, and temperaments. The most common stars in our galaxy are the small red dwarfs. They make up nearly 3/4 of all stars, and they can live for trillions of years, far longer than our Sun. On the surface, this sounds ideal for life, an almost eternal star that could give its planets unimaginable amounts of time to evolve. But red dwarfs are prone to violent flares, bursts of radiation so intense they could strip away the atmosphere of a planet orbiting too close. For any fragile early life, that kind of instability is a death sentence. Even if life could get started around such stars, it would have to endure constant bombardment, a cosmic lottery where survival is never guaranteed. On the opposite end of the spectrum are the giant hot stars. These blue and white giants burn with incredible intensity, radiating far more energy than our Sun, yet their brilliance is short-lived. Some of them last only a few million years before exploding in spectacular supernovas. Under a giant star, evolution would likely run out of time before it even had the chance to begin. These stars may light up galaxies, but they are poor candidates for nurturing anything as fragile as biology. The Sun sits in a middle ground. Classified as a yellow dwarf, it is neither the smallest nor the largest, neither the faintest nor the brightest. It has been shining steadily for about 4.6 billion years and will continue for another 5 billion or so before swelling into a red giant. This long lifespan is crucial because complex life does not appear overnight. It took Earth nearly 4 billion years of trial and error, mass extinctions, and slow evolutionary steps before humans emerged. Without the Sun's patient and relatively calm energy, this drawn-out process would have had no stage to play upon. While the Sun does have an 11-year cycle of sunspots and occasional solar storms, its overall output remains surprisingly steady. This means Earth receives nearly the same amount of energy year after year, century after century. A slightly more active Sun might have blasted Earth with harmful radiation, destabilizing its climate and damaging DNA before protective layers like the ozone developed. A slightly weaker Sun might have left the planet frozen, with oceans locked under ice and chemistry slowed to a crawl. Instead, our star has held a near-perfect balance, allowing the thin line of habitability to remain open. This balance may not be common. Studies of Sun-like stars in our galaxy show that many of them flicker more erratically, with sudden increases or decreases in brightness. Some undergo violent outbursts that could devastate planets unlucky enough to orbit nearby. If Earth had been tied to such a star, the story of life here might have ended before it ever began. Another piece of the puzzle is the Sun's rotation. Young stars often spin quickly, generating stronger magnetic fields and more violent activity. The Sun, however, has slowed over time, and its relative gentleness today is linked to this more moderate spin. If it were rotating faster, solar winds and radiation could have been harsher, especially in Earth's early days. Instead, the Sun allowed the fragile balance of atmosphere, water, and climate to settle, which gave life the stable canvas it needed. Of course, the Sun has not been perfectly constant. Billions of years ago, it was fainter than today. This paradox, known as the faint young sun problem, suggests that early Earth should have been frozen. Yet somehow, liquid water persisted, likely due to higher concentrations of greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide and methane. The fact that Earth's climate stayed within habitable limits despite these shifts shows how finely balanced the relationship between star and planet must be. Too much greenhouse effect and Earth would have overheated like Venus. Too little, and it would have frozen like Mars. Our Sun provided the baseline, but Earth's atmosphere had to do its own balancing act as well. Even today, solar activity influences life in subtle ways. Solar flares can disrupt satellites, power grids, and communication systems, a reminder that the Sun still has a temper. Yet compared to many other stars, these outbursts are mild. Our planet's magnetic field and atmosphere shield us from much of the radiation, and the Sun's relatively quiet behavior means that life has not faced catastrophic disruptions on a regular basis. Civilization itself depends on this predictability. Agriculture, navigation, and energy systems all rely on the Sun's steady rhythm. A more chaotic star would make such stability nearly impossible. The Sun, then, is not just any star. It may be part of a small minority that provides exactly the right conditions for life to not only appear, but also endure long enough to become complex and self-aware. It also formed in a galaxy filled with heavier elements forged in earlier generations of stars. Without these elements, carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, iron, planets like Earth could not exist. But if the Sun had formed too early, before these elements were widespread, there would be no rocky worlds to host life. If it had formed too late, it might be orbiting in a galaxy already fading into decline. Instead, it formed at a golden moment, when the galaxy was rich enough to provide the ingredients, but still full of energy to sustain billions of stars. The Sun story is about balance at every level. For billions of years, it has provided the steady fuel for Earth's grand experiment. Whether this balance is a cosmic rarity or something that happens often across the stars remains one of the great open questions. The Goldilocks orbit. Earth's lucky position in space. The orbit Earth follows around the Sun is not too close and not too far, and this balance has allowed liquid water to pool on its surface for billions of years. It sounds like a simple thing, just distance from the star, but the reality is more fragile than it seems. A small change in Earth's position, either inward or outward, could have tipped the balance toward a frozen wasteland or a scorched desert, leaving no stable ground for biology to take hold. Astronomers call this delicate range of distances the habitable zone, or sometimes the Goldilocks zone. If Earth were nudged even a little closer to the Sun, the extra heat would drive a runaway greenhouse effect. Carbon dioxide and water vapor in the air would trap more and more heat, boiling oceans into thick clouds until the surface became an inferno. A little farther out, the reverse happens. Heat would leak away into space, ice would spread, and carbon dioxide would freeze out of the atmosphere, leaving the world locked in permanent frost. Venus orbits at about 70% of Earth's distance from the Sun. That difference is not enormous, but it is enough to change everything. Venus likely once had water on its surface, but being slightly closer meant it received more solar energy. That energy pushed its climate into instability, and once the runaway greenhouse began, it could not be stopped. Now, Venus has thick clouds, crushing air pressure and surface temperatures hot enough to melt lead. Mars is the opposite. At about 1.5 times Earth's distance from the Sun, it is too far to hold much warmth. Any thick atmosphere it once had leaked away into space, leaving behind a thin shell of air and a frozen desert. Earth sits neatly in the middle, a rare position that has allowed it to stay temperate across billions of years. But position alone is not enough. The Sun's energy has slowly grown stronger over time. That means other processes were also helping to keep conditions stable. Greenhouse gases in the early atmosphere trapped more heat when the Sun was weaker, then slowly declined as the Sun brightened. Plate tectonics recycled carbon between the air, oceans, and rocks, pulling it out when the world grew too hot and releasing it when the world grew too cold. In this way, Earth's orbit was the stage, but the play itself depended on a web of feedbacks and balances. Planetary systems form with a variety of arrangements. Some planets drift inward or outward over time. Some are tugged by neighboring worlds into unstable paths. Gas giants like Jupiter can fling smaller planets away or shift their orbits through subtle gravitational nudges. In our case, Earth ended up in just the right zone, but the story could easily have been different. Thousands of exoplanets have been discovered, but many are either too close or too far from their stars. Even among those in the just right range, the details matter. A planet that looks promising at first may orbit a star that flares violently, stripping away atmospheres. Another may be tilted too far or locked with one side, always facing its star, leaving one hemisphere baked and the other frozen. The habitable zone is not a guarantee of life. It is only the first requirement. Yet even that requirement is far from common. The just right orbit also works in tandem with Earth's size. If Earth were much smaller, it could not hold a thick atmosphere, even if it were in the correct zone. Mars shows us that outcome clearly. If Earth were much larger, it might have gathered too much gas during its formation and ended up as a mini Neptune, cloaked in thick layers of hydrogen and helium. The lucky balance of mass and orbit together gave Earth a surface where oceans could remain stable and skies could protect against the cold of space. What makes the Goldilocks orbit so striking is not only that it exists, but that it has stayed stable for so long. If Earth's orbit had been unstable, those long stretches of stability would not have been possible. The fact that Earth's orbit is nearly circular rather than highly stretched out helps prevent extreme swings in climate. Its tilt and rotation add a rhythm of seasons without pushing conditions into chaos. The more we learn about planets, the more we see how rare Earth's balance may be. Some systems pack their planets close together, leaving no room for stable, temperate orbits. Others have giant planets migrating inward, sweeping habitable zones clear. Even when planets do sit in the right region, they may be locked into harsh cycles of freezing and thawing, or subjected to stellar storms. Our orbit is a harmony of many moving parts, each one lined up just right. The shield of the giants, Jupiter, Saturn, and cosmic protection. Jupiter and Saturn might seem distant and irrelevant to our story, but their role has been critical. Without them, Earth might have been nothing more than a battered, lifeless rock, constantly reset by devastating impacts from comets and asteroids. Instead, their gravitational power acted as a kind of shield, pulling in or deflecting countless space projectiles that otherwise could have struck our planet and snuffed out any chance for complex life to take hold. In the early days of the solar system, chaos reigned. Billions of chunks of rock and ice orbited the young sun, leftovers from the birth of the planets. Some clumped together into worlds, others wandered freely, crashing into anything in their path. Earth, Mars, and the other rocky planets were bombarded endlessly. For hundreds of millions of years, the inner solar system was a shooting gallery, with impacts so violent they boiled oceans, vaporized crust, and melted surface rock into seas of magma. Life, if it tried to gain a foothold during that time, would have been constantly wiped out by these disasters. But then there was Jupiter, the largest planet in our system, more than 300 times the mass of Earth. Jupiter's gravity is a force to be reckoned with. It acts like a cosmic vacuum cleaner, pulling in comets and asteroids that stray too close. Saturn, a little smaller but still vast, adds to this defense. Together, these planets have swallowed or deflected countless objects that otherwise might have collided with Earth. Their presence reduced the level of destruction, slowly giving Earth a chance to calm down and stabilize long enough for oceans to remain and life to emerge. In 1994, comet Shoemaker Levy 9 broke apart and slammed into Jupiter in a series of massive explosions. Each impact left scars the size of Earth on Jupiter's atmosphere. If Jupiter hadn't been there, that comet could have easily entered the inner solar system and threatened our world. The event was a clear reminder of how much danger lurks in space and how fortunate we are to have giant planets taking some of the hits. Jupiter and Saturn's gravity acts like a shepherd, shaping the paths of countless objects. Some comets are deflected entirely out of the solar system, flung into deep space where they can never return. Others are nudged into orbits that keep them far from Earth. In a way, Jupiter and Saturn are not just shields, but guardians, keeping order in a system that might otherwise have been too chaotic for stability. Yet there is a paradox in this protection. Jupiter and Saturn have not only shielded Earth, but also caused destruction. Their gravity has the power to redirect asteroids toward the inner planets, creating deadly risks. Some scientists believe that many of the great impactors that struck Earth in its early history, including the one that ended the age of the dinosaurs, may have been nudged onto collision courses by the gas giants themselves. The balance the giants provide is fragile, and it just so happens that for Earth, it has been more beneficial than harmful. If a world like Earth forms without nearby giants, it might be doomed. Constant bombardments from comets and asteroids could reset any attempt at complex life. Oceans might never last long enough. Continents might never stabilize, and any primitive cells might be boiled away again and again before they have a chance to evolve. Even if life managed to begin, it might remain trapped at a simple microbial stage, forever starting over after each catastrophe. At the same time, not just any giant planet will do. Their positions matter. If Jupiter had been closer to the Sun, its gravity might have destabilized Earth's orbit or prevented our planet from forming at all. If it had been much farther away, its protective reach would have been weaker, leaving Earth more exposed. Even Saturn plays a role in balancing the system, as the tug-of-war between Jupiter and Saturn has shaped the asteroid belt and influenced the flow of comets. Mass extinctions have happened, sometimes from space rocks that slipped through the giant's defenses. The most famous of these was 66 million years ago, when a large asteroid hit near what is now Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula. It was a reminder that even with giant guardians, Earth is never fully safe. How many Earth-like worlds out there never made it past this stage? A planet could have oceans, continents, an atmosphere, and even early life, but if it orbits without giant guardians, it might be a world of false starts. Jupiter and Saturn are part of a chain of coincidences that gave us the right orbit, the right star, the right moon, and the right stability. Each factor alone may not be unique, but together they form a narrow pathway through chaos. It is easy to imagine countless other systems where just one of those factors is missing. To find another Earth, we may need to find not just a twin of our planet, but also a twin of Jupiter and Saturn. Worlds massive enough to guard, but placed far enough away to leave room for a habitable zone. The role of the Moon in keeping Earth alive. The story of the Moon begins with a catastrophe. Roughly 4.5 billion years ago, soon after the Earth itself had formed, it is believed that a Mars-sized body, sometimes called Theia, collided with our young planet. The impact was so violent that it melted parts of Earth's crust and sent vast amounts of rock and molten debris hurling into space. Out of that debris, the Moon slowly came together, orbiting the Earth and gradually settling into the companion we know today. This violent birth makes our Moon different from most moons in the solar system. It is unusually large compared to its parent planet, far bigger in proportion than, say, the tiny moons of Mars, or the small companions circling Jupiter and Saturn. One of the Moon's most vital roles is in stabilizing Earth's axial tilt. Our planet is tilted at about 23.5 degrees relative to its orbit around the Sun, and that tilt is the reason we have seasons. Without the Moon, gravitational nudges from the Sun, Jupiter and other planets could have caused that tilt to swing wildly over long timescales. Computer models show that without the Moon, Earth's tilt might vary anywhere between 0 and 85 degrees. That means that sometimes the planet could stand almost upright, with no seasons at all, while at other times it could tip so far that the poles would point nearly directly at the Sun. Such swings would bring chaotic climate changes, searing heat at what used to be the poles, frozen darkness at what used to be the equator, and no stable pattern for ecosystems to adapt to. Evolution thrives on a certain amount of change, but it also needs long periods of relative stability. Forests, grasslands, coral reefs. All of these ecosystems depend on seasonal cycles and predictable climate zones. The Moon, by anchoring Earth's tilt, ensured that the planet's seasons remain steady over millions of years. It also affects the length of our days. When Earth first formed, a day may have lasted as little as 6 hours. The gravitational pull of the Moon created tides, and over billions of years, the friction caused by those tides has slowed Earth's rotation. Today, we have 24-hour days because of the Moon. Longer days gave the planet a more even distribution of sunlight and nighttime cooling, creating conditions that allowed ecosystems to stabilize. If Earth still spun at its original speed, the difference between day and night temperatures would be far more extreme, making the climate less hospitable. The tides themselves, driven by the Moon's pull, have also played a major role in life's story. Tidal pools and shallow coastal zones, where water levels rise and fall, may have been the perfect laboratories for early life to experiment. These shifting environments exposed organisms to cycles of wet and dry, salty and fresh, pushing them to adapt in ways that may have eventually led to the first steps onto land. Even after life spread widely, tides remained crucial. They mix ocean waters, circulate nutrients, and support the productivity of coastal ecosystems. Entire chains of life, fish, birds, shellfish, and eventually human civilizations depend on the rhythm of the tides. By raising tides and stirring Earth's oceans, the Moon may have helped regulate the global climate, preventing runaway extremes. The cycles it set in motion gave Earth a kind of heartbeat, a natural rhythm that life could grow in tune with. Most planets we have observed outside our solar system do not appear to have such large moons. Even within our own system, no other terrestrial planet comes close. Mars's moons are tiny captured rocks. Venus and Mercury have none at all. Giant planets like Jupiter and Saturn do have many moons, but those worlds are gas giants, utterly different environments where Earth-like life seems unlikely. The presence of a large stabilizing moon around a rocky, habitable planet might be a rare feature in the universe. If that is true, then the Moon is one of the hidden filters in the search for life. Without it, Earth might still be home to life, perhaps microbial mats in shallow seas, perhaps hardy bacteria surviving in extreme conditions, but not forests, not animals, and not intelligence. The Moon has shaped our culture, our myths, and our imagination. Ancient peoples tracked its cycles to mark time and seasons. It has guided calendars, inspired stories, and through tides influenced when and how humans fished or farmed. In a real sense, the Moon has been part of human civilization since the beginning. Its physical presence made us possible, and its symbolic presence guided how we understood the sky. When astronauts set foot on the Moon in 1969, they were stepping onto the very companion that had shaped Earth's destiny. That moment underscored how intertwined our planet is with this neighbor. It is hard to imagine Earth without the Moon, not just in terms of culture, but in terms of biology itself. If the Moon had never formed, there is a good chance that humanity would not be here to wonder about it. Mars, a planet that may have almost made it. When scientists look at Mars today, one of the first things they notice are the channels carved into its surface. These are not the marks of random processes, but the clear paths of water flowing for long stretches of time. Some of these valleys look remarkably like dried-up riverbeds on Earth, winding and branching in the same patterns. Others are shorter and steeper, suggesting sudden bursts of water released from underground. There are also deltas, the fan-shaped deposits left behind when water slows and spreads out into a wider basin, as if ancient rivers ended in lakes. All of these features point toward a period when Mars was warmer and wetter than it is today. The planet we see now, with its thin atmosphere and freezing deserts, hides a past where liquid water was not only possible but widespread. The idea that Mars once had water leads one to naturally wonder if it had life. On Earth, wherever water flows, life follows. From deep-sea vents to frozen lakes beneath glaciers, microbes thrive in environments that seem extreme to us, but perfectly natural to them. If Mars really had long-lived rivers and lakes, then the chances are strong that simple forms of life might have developed there. Microbes could have taken root in shallow pools or underground aquifers, feeding on minerals and perhaps even spreading across the surface. But if such life ever appeared, it faced challenges that were far greater than anything encountered by early life on Earth. One of the main problems was Mars's atmosphere. Today it is less than 1% as thick as Earth's, and it offers little protection against the cold or the harsh radiation from the sun. Billions of years ago, however, it was thicker. A denser atmosphere would have trapped more heat, allowing liquid water to remain stable on the surface. But Mars had a flaw. It lacked the kind of strong magnetic field that Earth enjoys. On Earth, our magnetic field acts like a shield, deflecting charged particles streaming from the sun. Without that protection, Mars's atmosphere was slowly stripped away by solar winds. Over hundreds of millions of years, the planet bled out its air, becoming colder and drier until water could no longer survive except as ice or underground brines. This change turned Mars into the world we see today. Any surface water evaporated into space or froze beneath the soil. The once thick atmosphere thinned into a fragile veil of carbon dioxide. The climate shifted from one that may have been able to support lakes and seas to one that could barely hold frost. For life, if it had started, this was devastating. Microbes on the surface would have been exposed to deadly radiation. Any chance of complex evolution was cut off. Yet this does not necessarily mean Mars is completely lifeless. It may still hide traces of its biological past, or even pockets of survival. One place scientists are especially interested in is underground. Beneath Mars's surface, there could be layers of ice and salty water that remain stable. In such environments, shielded from radiation and with enough minerals to provide energy, microbes could still persist. Similar organisms exist in extreme environments on Earth, such as deep beneath permafrost or in briny pools beneath glaciers. Mars rovers and orbiters have detected hints of methane in the atmosphere, and while this gas can be produced by non-biological processes, on Earth it is often tied to microbial activity. These fleeting signals spark excitement and debate. Beyond the question of life, Mars also tells us something about the fragility of habitability. Compared to Earth, Mars is smaller, with weaker gravity. This made it harder for the planet to hold onto its atmosphere over long stretches of time. It also cooled more quickly, losing much of the volcanic activity that could have replenished gases. In a sense, Mars shows what can happen when a planet sits on the edge of the habitable zone but cannot hold its balance. It began with promise but could not sustain the conditions needed for long-term stability. If scientists were to uncover fossilized microbes in Martian rocks or detect living organisms in subsurface brines, it would prove that life is not unique to Earth. The discovery would show that given the right conditions, biology can arise more than once in the same solar system. On the other hand, if Mars turns out to be completely sterile, despite having once been habitable, it might suggest that life is far rarer than we hope. Rovers such as Curiosity and Perseverance continue to search for answers, drilling into rocks and analyzing soil for organic molecules. They look for signs that water once lingered long enough for chemistry to take hold. Future missions may even bring samples back to Earth, where scientists can study them with more powerful tools. Together, they might tell the story of a planet that nearly joined Earth as a cradle of life, but instead became a barren desert. Whether or not it ever hosted life, Mars stands as a monument to how delicate the balance of habitability truly is. It almost made it, and perhaps, deep beneath the dust, it still clings to the faintest echo of what might have been. Europa, the ocean beneath the ice. Far from Earth, circling the giant planet Jupiter, is a world that does not look promising at first sight. Europa is smaller than our own moon and covered in ice. From above, it appears to be nothing but a smooth white sphere, scored by long cracks and faint ridges that run across its surface like scars. There are no continents, no seas, no forests, no obvious signs that it could ever host life. Yet beneath its cold shell may lie one of the most exciting environments in the solar system, a hidden ocean, larger than all of Earth's combined, sealed away under kilometers of ice. In the late 1970s and 1980s, probes like Voyager passed through the Jupiter system and captured close-up images of Europa. Instead of being covered with craters like most moons, Europa's surface was strangely fresh and active-looking. The long lines across its icy shell suggested something below was moving, shifting and perhaps pushing against the crust. Later, the Galileo spacecraft, which orbited Jupiter in the 1990s, confirmed the evidence. The moon's magnetic field appeared to be interacting with Jupiter's in a way that suggested a salty, liquid layer beneath the ice. This was the first strong hint that Europa hid a vast ocean, kept warm not by sunlight, but by the gravitational pull of Jupiter. Europa is locked in a delicate dance with Jupiter and the other large moons. The immense gravity of the gas giant pulls and squeezes the little moon as it orbits, generating heat through tidal forces. This heating prevents the underground water from freezing solid, even though surface temperatures are colder than the most extreme places on Earth. In effect, Europa has a built-in energy source, one that can keep its ocean liquid for billions of years. On Earth, wherever there is liquid water, energy, and the right chemistry, life is found. That is why Europa has become such a focus of scientific imagination. If life could develop in its ocean, it would mean that biology does not need sunlight and open air to emerge. It only needs the right conditions in hidden, protected pockets. Deep at the bottom of our oceans, hydrothermal vents spew hot, mineral-rich water from cracks in the seafloor. Around these vents thrive entire ecosystems of strange creatures, tube worms, crabs, shrimp, and microbes, that live without any sunlight at all. Instead of photosynthesis, they rely on chemosynthesis. These environments are often seen as models for what life on Europa might look like, small, resilient organisms clinging to heat and chemistry in the deep ocean, possibly evolving into more complex forms over time. The icy crust above Europa's ocean may even be thin enough in places for cracks to connect the surface to the water below. Observations from the Hubble Space Telescope have hinted at giant plumes of water vapor erupting into space from Europa's surface, much like geysers. If these plumes are confirmed, they could be direct vents from the subsurface ocean, offering a way for future spacecraft to sample the water without needing to drill through miles of ice. Life, if it exists there, would face challenges. The surface is bombarded with radiation from Jupiter's magnetic field, making it deadly for anything exposed on top. The ocean below, while shielded, is a dark and closed system. Whether biology could arise in such a place depends on whether the chemical building blocks of life are present, and whether enough time and stability have been available for life to take hold. Scientists continue to debate what kind of life might realistically exist there. Some think microbes are the best-case scenario, tiny organisms that survive around chemical energy sources. Others allow themselves to dream of larger creatures, perhaps resembling the fish or squid of Earth's deep seas, though such ideas remain highly speculative. The fact that Europa's ocean has likely persisted for billions of years is one of the strongest arguments for the possibility of life. If life is found there, even in microbial form, it would suggest that life is not confined to Earth-like planets with sunlight and open skies, but can also thrive in hidden oceans under ice, powered by tidal heating or chemical reactions. Suddenly, countless icy moons and dwarf planets across the solar system, and even beyond, would become candidates for habitability. Places like Enceladus around Saturn, or distant objects in the Kuiper Belt, could all be seen as potential cradles for life. Europa, in this way, acts as a symbol of possibility. Missions are already being prepared to answer these questions. NASA's Europa Clipper, launched in 2024, will orbit Jupiter and make dozens of close passes over Europa. It will scan the surface, measure its ice thickness, test the chemistry of its environment, and search for signs of plumes. Europe's JUICE, or Jupiter Icy Moons Explorer mission, will also investigate Europa, along with other Jovian moons, trying to understand the balance of their oceans and potential for habitability. These missions may not directly find life, but they will tell us how realistic it is that Europa's ocean could support it. Titan, a methane-based laboratory for alien chemistry. Titan is unlike any other place in the solar system. When spacecraft first sent back images of its hazy orange atmosphere, it was clear this moon of Saturn was something different. Instead of a dry and frozen wasteland, Titan turned out to have rivers, lakes, and even seas. But these were not filled with water. They were made of liquid methane and ethane, hydrocarbons that on Earth would exist only as gases. In Titan's frigid environment, where the surface temperature stays around 179 degrees Celsius, these molecules take on a liquid form. This gives Titan a landscape that looks strangely familiar, carved by flowing rivers, shaped by rainfall and bordered by lake shores, and yet is built out of alien chemistry. It is a world that shows what happens when chemistry unfolds under conditions very different from Earth. On Earth, life depends on liquid water as a solvent, because it dissolves molecules and allows reactions to happen. On Titan, water is locked away as rock-hard ice. Instead, methane and ethane play the role of fluids that shape the surface and cycle through the atmosphere. Methane rains down, collects in rivers and fills lakes, only to evaporate back up again in a cycle that mirrors Earth's water cycle. This cycle gives Titan an active and changing surface, a feature rare among moons. Titan's atmosphere is thick, mostly nitrogen with small amounts of methane, and more similar to Earth's than any other atmosphere in the solar system. Sunlight breaks apart the methane in the upper atmosphere, sparking complex chemical reactions. These reactions form organic molecules, chains of carbon and hydrogen, sometimes with nitrogen added. Over time, these organics clump together and fall as a sort of chemical snow, covering Titan's surface with material that could act as building blocks for life. While the cold temperatures make life as we know it unlikely, Titan shows that organic chemistry does not need Earth-like warmth to take place. It can happen even in the deep freeze. Beneath Titan's icy crust, there may also be another surprise: a subsurface ocean of water mixed with ammonia. If such an ocean exists, it would represent a second environment where life might take hold. On the surface, alien chemistry unfolds with methane as the liquid of choice. Underground, the conditions might be more familiar, with water acting as a solvent. This dual nature makes Titan especially intriguing. Two very different potential habitats stacked together in one small moon. One is unimaginably strange, the other closer to what we know. Either could carry the seeds of biology, though in very different ways. The lakes and seas on Titan are vast, some larger than the Great Lakes on Earth. The largest, Kraken Mare, is hundreds of kilometers across. These seas are not static. They have waves, shorelines that shift with the seasons, and possibly even tides caused by Saturn's pull. To stand on Titan's edge and look across a liquid methane sea would be to glimpse a kind of alien Earth, where familiar landscapes are built out of unfamiliar materials. And just as Earth's seas have been central to life, Titan's seas tempt scientists with the idea that something could be happening within them, some chemistry, some spark that inches toward life. One of the biggest questions is whether life could exist in liquid methane at all. Water is a polar molecule, meaning it has a slight electric charge on each end, which helps it dissolve many substances. Methane is nonpolar, which makes it a poor solvent for most molecules that Earth-based biology relies on. This has led some scientists to wonder whether life on Titan would need to be completely different from anything we know. Instead of using water-based cell membranes, for example, it might use structures made from hydrocarbons. Instead of oxygen-based chemistry, it could rely on hydrogen or other elements. Titan forces us to stretch our imagination and consider forms of life not bound by Earth's example. NASA's Cassini spacecraft gave us the most detailed view of Titan so far. It revealed lakes shining near the poles, thick clouds drifting across the sky, and vast dunes stretching across equatorial regions. These dunes are made not of sand, but of tiny grains of solid hydrocarbons, blown across the surface by winds. Cassini's radar could peer through the thick haze, showing a world alive with geological and atmospheric processes. Then, in 2005, the European Huygens probe landed on Titan, the only spacecraft to ever touch down on the surface. Its images showed a landscape shaped by flowing liquids, with rounded pebbles likely sculpted by ancient methane streams. For a brief time, humanity saw Titan's alien shorelines directly, before the probe's batteries went dark. NASA's Dragonfly mission, planned for launch in the 2030s, will send a drone-like rotorcraft to fly across Titan's surface. Unlike Mars, Titan's thick atmosphere and low gravity make flight relatively easy. Dragonfly will be able to travel from site to site, sampling organics, exploring dunes, and searching for chemical processes that might resemble the first steps toward life. It will not be looking for organisms in the usual sense, but rather for signs of prebiotic chemistry, reactions that could, given enough time and the right conditions, build complexity. If anything unusual is found, it will reshape how we think about life's possibilities. Titan stands as a reminder that habitability does not need to look like Earth. A world can be alive with chemistry, with cycles, with landscapes, and yet be unimaginably different from what we know. Its rivers are not water, but methane. Its rocks are not stone, but ice. And yet, when we look at it, we see patterns that feel familiar. This mix of the alien and the recognizable is what makes Titan so compelling. It suggests that the universe might hold many worlds that look nothing like Earth, and yet still provide fertile ground for strange forms of chemistry, and perhaps life itself. The catalogue of other Earths. How many are out there? When astronomers first began searching for planets beyond our solar system, many thought that Earth-like worlds would be rare. In the early 1990s, when the first confirmed exoplanets were discovered, they were nothing like Earth. Some were massive gas giants hugging their stars so tightly that their orbits lasted only a few days. Others were in wildly unstable systems that seemed far too hostile for life. At the time, it was easy to wonder whether our planet was a true oddity, a rare jewel in a barren universe. But over the past 2 decades, that view has shifted dramatically. Thanks to missions like Kepler and TESS, and the growing fleet of ground-based observatories, we now know that planets are not just common, they may outnumber the stars themselves. The real surprise is how many of those planets could fall into a category that resembles our own world in some way. The Kepler Space Telescope, launched in 2009, was designed to stare at a patch of sky and watch for the faint dimming of stars as planets passed in front of them. For years, it monitored over 150,000 stars, recording thousands of transits. From that treasure trove of data came a stunning realization. Roughly 1 in 5 Sun-like stars appears to have a planet similar in size to Earth, orbiting within the habitable zone. This was a staggering statistic. If even a fraction of these planets are stable and rocky, then the Milky Way might host billions of potential Earth-like worlds. But as with all discoveries in astronomy, the numbers are layered with nuance. The habitable zone, as discussed, is not a guarantee of habitability. The catalogue of Earth-like planets is growing, but the question of which ones are truly other Earths remains unsolved. Still, the statistics alone are powerful. If there are hundreds of billions of stars in our galaxy, and if perhaps 10% of them host Earth-sized worlds in habitable zones, the number of potential Earths climbs into the tens of billions. Spread across the spiral arms of the Milky Way, these planets could be orbiting quietly, waiting to be discovered. And that's just in our own galaxy. If we expand to the estimated 2 trillion galaxies in the observable universe, the count becomes too vast to grasp. The challenge lies in moving from broad numbers to specific examples. Kepler gave us statistics, but many of its discoveries were too far away for follow-up studies. We could see the shadows of these planets, but not their details. That's where missions like TESS, launched in 2018, have stepped in. Instead of staring at one small patch of sky, TESS scans nearly the entire sky, focusing on nearby bright stars. The planets it finds are close enough that future telescopes can study their atmospheres directly. With these tools, scientists hope to move from simply counting planets to actually searching for biosignatures, the chemical fingerprints of life. Among the worlds already identified, a few stand out. Kepler 452b, sometimes called Earth's cousin, orbits a Sun-like star in a habitable zone. Kepler 186f, another famous candidate, is only slightly larger than Earth and receives just enough sunlight to keep water liquid if conditions are right. The TRAPPIST-1 system has also captured attention. This small, faint red dwarf star hosts 7 rocky planets, 3 of which lie in the habitable zone. If life could emerge on one, could it spread between them, hopping from planet to planet? The discovery of these planets also forces us to broaden our definition of what makes a world Earth-like. Size and distance from a star are important, but they are not the only factors. A planet's atmosphere, geology, and magnetic field all play crucial roles. For example, a world slightly larger than Earth, a super-Earth, might be even more suitable for life if its gravity holds a stable atmosphere and its interior drives strong tectonic activity. These factors could create long-lasting climates and nutrient cycles that favor biology. On the other hand, a world too large may become more like Neptune, with thick gas layers and no solid surface. The line between habitable and uninhabitable is delicate, and our tools are only now becoming sharp enough to investigate it. Even if there are billions of habitable worlds, life may not appear easily. Some scientists argue that Earth's long chain of lucky breaks might be exceptionally rare. Others counter that life, once conditions are even slightly favorable, could be nearly inevitable. Without being able to peer directly at the surfaces of these planets, the debate remains unresolved. The next step is to analyze their atmospheres for signs of oxygen, methane, or other gases that could hint at living processes. This is where the James Webb Space Telescope and its successors are already pushing the frontier. Many of the most common stars in the galaxy are red dwarfs. These stars burn cool and dim, which means their habitable zones are much closer in. That makes planets easier to detect, but it also means those planets face challenges like tidal locking and intense stellar flares. Some researchers think red dwarf planets may be too unstable for life, while others argue that life could adapt to the unusual conditions. If red dwarf planets prove habitable, then the catalogue of other Earths expands dramatically, since these stars make up the bulk of the galaxy's population. In the coming decades, astronomers hope to build telescopes specifically designed to search for Earth-like worlds in detail. Concepts like the LUVOIR or HABEX missions envision giant space observatories equipped with star shades or advanced coronagraphs to block out starlight and directly image planets. These would allow us not only to measure atmospheres, but to actually see pale blue dots orbiting distant suns. The dream is to spot a planet with clouds, continents, and oceans, an unmistakable twin of our own home. Every new discovery adds to a growing picture of a galaxy that is alive with planets. Some may be barren and hostile. Others may hold conditions suitable for biology. And somewhere among them, there could be one where rivers flow, forests grow, and skies are filled with the songs of life. The search is far from over, but for the first time in human history, we can say with confidence that Earth is not an isolated miracle. It is one among many, scattered across the stars, waiting for us to find them. super-Earths and mini-Neptunes, the missing types in our system. When astronomers first began to study planets around other stars in large numbers, they expected to find a universe that looked something like our own solar system. A few small rocky planets close to their stars, then larger gas and ice giants farther out with empty space in between. What they found instead was a surprise. The most common kinds of planets in the galaxy are ones we don't even have here at home. These are the super-Earths and mini-Neptunes. Super-Earths are larger than our world, but smaller than the giant planets, often somewhere between 2 to 10 times Earth's mass. Mini-Neptunes fall in a similar size range, but with thicker atmospheres and possibly icy or gassy interiors. To us, they sound exotic, but for the galaxy, they appear ordinary. Kepler and TESS have revealed thousands of these worlds orbiting stars of many kinds. In fact, it seems that they may be the default kind of planet nature produces, while our own system's lack of one is the unusual case. Super-Earths, with more gravity and possibly thicker atmospheres, could hold on to their water and protect it for billions of years. This makes them potential long-term havens for life. Mini-Neptunes, while wrapped in heavier layers of gas, may hide rocky surfaces or oceans below, creating strange habitats unlike anything we can imagine. Yet, without an example here in our system, we can't study them up close. Why does our solar system lack one of the galaxy's most common planets? Early in the solar system's formation, smaller planets merged into the rocky ones we know, while gas giants formed farther out. A world in between, a super-Earth or mini-Neptune, may have formed but then been destroyed, flung away or absorbed into the Sun. Another idea is that Jupiter's early movement through the solar system disrupted planetary building blocks, preventing such a planet from surviving. The presence of super-Earths elsewhere also complicates how we think about Earth-like planets. For years, the search for life focused on finding twins of our world. But now we know that planets slightly larger than Earth might actually be more stable for life. Their volcanism might recycle materials more effectively, keeping their surfaces alive and dynamic. Mini-Neptunes, with their deep atmospheres of hydrogen and helium, may seem hostile at first, but astronomers think some could hide layers of water oceans below their clouds, warmed by internal heat. These hidden oceans may never see starlight, but they could remain stable for billions of years. In theory, life could evolve in such environments. The challenge is that detecting such possibilities from afar is extremely difficult. Light from their atmospheres can be studied, but what lies beneath remains hidden. Some planets may straddle the line between the two, depending on how thick their atmospheres are. A world just slightly larger than Earth could develop into a super-Earth if its atmosphere stays thin, or into a mini-Neptune if it gathers too much gas. This balance depends on details like how close the planet is to its star, how active that star is, and how much heat and radiation strip away lighter gases. As a result, the same process of planet building can create very different outcomes. Astronomers have already identified several fascinating candidates among these types. Kepler 452b is a super-Earth. Kepler 22b is another, larger than Earth, but in the habitable zone where liquid water could exist. Mini-Neptunes like GJ 1214b have atmospheres so thick and strange that researchers debate whether they are wrapped in clouds of water vapor or covered in exotic ices. The James Webb Space Telescope has begun to peer into their atmospheres, detecting hints of water vapor, methane, and other gases. But these early steps only scratch the surface. To know whether these planets can host life, we would need to study their climates, surfaces, and oceans directly, tasks that may remain out of reach for decades. For now, they exist as faint signals in starlight, tantalizing in their abundance, but frustrating in their distance. The promise of rogue planets, life in the dark. Rogue planets are worlds that have been flung from their solar systems, left to drift between the stars with no sun to warm them. At first thought, such places sound dead, more like frozen corpses than living worlds. But rogue planets may offer one of the strangest and most overlooked paths to life in the galaxy. Rogue planets are not rare curiosities. Astronomers suspect there could be billions of them in our galaxy alone, perhaps even more than the number of stars. This idea comes from both observation and theory. When planetary systems form, the process is violent. Planets grow by crashing into each other. Gravity tugs them around like toys in a whirlpool. In the chaos, many young worlds are thrown out into interstellar space. Once gone, they never return. They wander the galaxy as cold exiles, drifting for billions of years through the endless dark. Some may even be captured again by another star's gravity, but many simply keep going, silent and alone. With no sunlight, their surfaces should quickly freeze into solid blocks of ice. Any oceans would harden, any air would collapse into frost. From a distance, they would look like dead spheres, black against the stars. But planets are not warmed only by their stars. Inside, they carry their own heat. When a planet forms, the energy of its birth, radioactive elements, leftover heat from collisions, and the slow squeeze of gravity remains trapped inside. On Earth, that hidden heat drives volcanoes, earthquakes, and the slow drift of continents. On a rogue planet, it could mean survival. Imagine a world ejected into deep space. Its surface freezes, locking away the seas, but deep below, the core remains hot. The pressure of the planet's crust acts as a blanket, keeping the heat from escaping too quickly. Over millions of years, this warmth can keep layers of liquid water trapped beneath the ice, much like what we see on moons such as Europa and Enceladus. In such a hidden ocean, life might find a foothold. Some scientists take the idea further by pointing out that a thick atmosphere of hydrogen could make rogue planets even more friendly to life. Hydrogen is an excellent insulator. A planet cloaked in a dense hydrogen atmosphere could trap its internal heat so well that liquid oceans might exist even on the surface, far from any star. This is a strange kind of habitability, worlds glowing with their own heat under a smothering sky, floating between the stars like warm embers. Such places might stay warm for billions of years, longer than many stars shine. Finding these worlds is one of astronomy's great challenges. A rogue planet gives off almost no light. Without a star to reflect, it vanishes into the dark. The only way we can detect them now is through clever tricks. One method is gravitational microlensing. When a rogue planet passes in front of a distant star, its gravity bends the star's light just enough to reveal its presence. These events are rare, but they have given us glimpses of rogue planets. Each detection hints at an invisible population drifting all around us. Some might even be close by, only a few dozen light years away, yet completely unseen. Without day or night, there would be no concept of seasons or sunlight. Life would grow in endless dark, guided only by the rhythm of heat flowing from the core. Creatures might evolve senses tuned to vibrations, pressure, or faint chemical changes in the water. A civilization on such a world, if one could ever arise, would never see the stars until it invented ways to break through its icy shell. Their myths, their science, their entire understanding of the universe would be shaped by darkness. To them, the idea of a blazing sun might seem fantastical, perhaps even incredibly hostile. Rogue planets could one day be destinations for human travelers. If our species manages to cross interstellar distances, these wandering worlds might serve as waypoints or shelters. A rogue planet with a subsurface ocean and internal heat could provide water, raw materials, and even protection from cosmic radiation under its ice. In a sense, they could act like stepping stones across the galaxy, hidden oases in the dark desert of interstellar space. The possibility of life on rogue planets also changes the way we think about the abundance of biology in the universe. If rogue planets can host life too, then the universe's potential is far greater. Suddenly, billions of additional worlds enter the equation. It is strange to think that the galaxy may be filled with living worlds that have never seen a sunrise. Yet perhaps, somewhere out there, a rogue planet carries a vast ocean of life, bubbling in eternal night. Maybe its creatures swim beneath icy ceilings, unaware that above them lies a universe of stars. Or maybe they know in their own way and wait for the day when something from outside finally comes to visit. The tools of SETI, from radio to optical beacons. For more than half a century, scientists have used radio telescopes to scan the skies in hopes of catching a signal not made by nature, but by intelligence. This work has become known as the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, or SETI. At its heart is a simple idea. If we are out here, perhaps others are too, and perhaps they have tried to say something. The challenge is knowing where to look, what to listen for, and how to recognize a signal if it ever does come. The story begins in the early 1960s, when radio astronomy was still a young science. In 1960, a project called OSMA became the first true SETI attempt. Using a large radio dish in West Virginia, astronomer Frank Drake pointed at two nearby sun-like stars and listened for weeks. Nothing came back, but the effort was historic. It proved the search could be done, and it planted the seed for a scientific field that has endured through decades of ups and downs. Radio was chosen for a reason. It travels through space with little absorption. It can be broadcast over long distances, and it can cut through the cosmic fog of dust and gas. The same qualities that make it excellent for our own communication networks make it a natural choice for interstellar messages. Scientists dream of a clear transmission, something unmistakable, like a repeating series of numbers or a narrowband signal concentrated on a single frequency. On the practical side, most of the actual work involves sifting through vast amounts of noise. Stars, galaxies, pulsars, and even human technology on Earth all fill the spectrum with signals. Separating the natural from the artificial is no easy task. Even so, the dream has kept the field alive. Over the years, programs like Project Phoenix, the Allen Telescope Array, and ongoing campaigns with giant dishes like Arecibo before its collapse have combed the skies across billions of frequencies. The famous WOW signal of 1977 is a reminder of how tantalizing the search can be. It was a strong, unexplained radio burst picked up by the Big Ear telescope in Ohio. Lasting just over a minute, it was powerful, clean, and unlike anything expected from natural sources. The astronomer who found it circled it on the computer printout and wrote "WOW" in the margin, giving it its name. Yet, despite many follow-up searches, it was never seen again. Was it interference from Earth, a natural burst we didn't understand, or the real thing? We may never know. As technology has advanced, so have the methods. Modern SETI can scan millions of radio channels at once, something early pioneers could only dream of. Powerful computers sort through the data, flagging unusual signals for review. Citizen science projects like SETI at home have even allowed ordinary people to help by donating spare computing power from their personal machines. The search is broader, deeper, and faster than ever before, and radio is no longer the only game in town. In recent years, attention has turned to light. Just as we use radio waves for communication, advanced civilizations might use powerful beams of visible or infrared light. Lasers, for example, can be incredibly bright and concentrated, outshining even stars if aimed in a narrow beam. A single pulse could carry information across interstellar space. Unlike radio signals, which can sometimes get muddled by background noise, a laser flash could stand out as something unmistakably artificial. For that reason, scientists have begun what is called optical SETI, looking for brief bursts of light that nature cannot easily produce. Optical SETI uses telescopes equipped with sensitive detectors that can notice nanosecond-scale flashes. These instruments scan the skies, often focusing on nearby stars. The idea is that if another civilization wanted to announce its presence, a directed laser pulse might be the clearest way to do it. There are even experiments aimed at searching through data from large sky surveys, checking whether any stars have shown suspiciously regular bursts of brightness. The expansion from radio to optical beacons shows how the field is maturing. We do not know how aliens, if they exist, would choose to communicate. They might use methods far beyond our imagination. Some scientists speculate about exotic possibilities. Neutrino beams, gravitational waves, even encoded patterns in starlight or cosmic rays. Most of these are far beyond our ability to detect today, but the principle is the same. Pick a part of nature that travels well across the universe and can carry information, then search it for patterns that look intentional. For now, radio and light are our best bets, because they are what we ourselves might use. By searching for signals, we are forced to ask what makes a message stand out as artificial. On Earth, we communicate using structured patterns, language, repetition, sequences that follow rules. In space, those same features would mark a signal as different from natural noise. A narrowband radio spike at one exact frequency, repeated again and again, would be very strange. A series of evenly spaced laser pulses would be stranger still. In this way, the search helps sharpen our sense of what makes intelligence recognizable, even in an unknown form. Next-generation radio telescopes like the Square Kilometre Array, now under construction, will be able to scan the skies with sensitivity unmatched in history. Huge optical surveys will cover more stars than ever before. Advances in artificial intelligence may help sift through the mountain of data, finding patterns humans might miss. Each improvement brings us closer to the possibility of catching something that changes everything. Unlike other sciences, SETI has no guarantee of success. The universe may be full of signals, or it may be silent. We may stumble upon something tomorrow or never at all, but the tools themselves are valuable. Radio arrays used for SETI also help map galaxies and pulsars. Optical detectors used to search for alien lasers can also catch fast natural events like stellar flares. The science is never wasted, even if the silence continues. At the same time, the silence is its own kind of answer. Each year of searching without success deepens the mystery of why we haven't heard anything yet. Are civilizations rare, short-lived, or simply uninterested in broadcasting? Do they use methods we cannot detect? Or are we still just scratching the surface of a universe teeming with voices? SETI doesn't pretend to know. It simply keeps its ears open, expanding the ways we might listen. Technosignatures, clues of alien technology in the sky. Technosignatures are the possible clues that a civilization has reached a level of advancement where its activities alter its surroundings in detectable ways. Instead of a conversation across light years, technosignatures would be more like finding the distant glow of a campfire in the dark. The idea of technosignatures goes back decades, but only recently has it begun to gain serious attention in astronomy. For a long time, most of the focus was on listening for radio signals, which is still a core part of SETI. But the universe offers many other ways civilizations might unintentionally reveal themselves. Just as humans have changed the face of Earth with our cities, machines, and energy use, an alien species might leave behind similar footprints that can be seen across the galaxy. The challenge is not just in imagining these possibilities, but in figuring out how to spot them and how to tell them apart from natural cosmic processes. One of the simplest kinds of technosignatures would be city lights. On Earth, the glow of cities at night is one of the clearest markers of human civilization. If a telescope on another planet were powerful enough to look at Earth from light years away, it might notice that one side of the planet glimmers in the dark, while the other side shines in the daylight. Scientists have considered whether advanced telescopes could detect such faint light on exoplanets. The contrast would be extremely subtle, drowned out by the brightness of the host star, but in theory, it could be done. If one day astronomers discovered a planet that shines in the dark in a way that natural processes cannot explain, it would be one of the most astonishing finds in history. Another possible technosignature could come from the gases in a planet's atmosphere. Life itself can alter the air, as it does on Earth. Oxygen, for example, is not stable in large amounts unless something is constantly producing it. On our planet, that something is life. But beyond biology, technology also changes the composition of the atmosphere. On Earth, human industry has released gases like chlorofluorocarbons, or CFCs, that do not occur naturally in significant amounts. If astronomers detected such artificial molecules in the air of an exoplanet, it would be hard to imagine any natural explanation. These would serve as chemical fingerprints of technology, an unintended broadcast of industrial activity across the stars. Some have wondered whether civilizations might build enormous structures in space. The most famous of these is the Dyson sphere, a hypothetical megastructure that would surround a star in order to capture its energy. The idea was proposed in the 1960s by physicist Freeman Dyson, who reasoned that advanced civilizations might eventually need more energy than their planet could provide. By building giant arrays of collectors, mirrors, or panels around their star, they could harness nearly all of its light. From our perspective, such a system would make the star appear dimmer or stranger than usual. Instead of shining with its full spectrum, the star might emit more infrared radiation, leaking waste heat from the vast machines orbiting it. Astronomers have even searched the sky for stars with unusual infrared signatures, wondering if they might reveal the presence of such colossal engineering projects. Civilizations might build orbital rings, swarms of satellites, or vast solar power stations that could still affect the way their planets or stars look from afar. In fact, in 2015, a star known as Tabby's star gained worldwide attention because its light was flickering in an unusual way. Some speculated that it might be surrounded by alien structures blocking its light. Although the most likely explanation turned out to be dust clouds, the incident showed how quickly the idea of technosignatures captures the imagination and how seriously scientists now take the possibility. Another category of technosignatures might come not from permanent structures, but from signs of energy use on a planetary scale. Human civilization already consumes vast amounts of energy, and our power grid gives off detectable radio noise into space. On a more advanced world, the use of energy might be so great that it creates visible heat signatures or patterns that can be picked out from the background of the cosmos. In fact, researchers have studied the Milky Way to see if any galaxies appear to be unusually dim in starlight, but bright in infrared, which could suggest that stars are being surrounded by artificial collectors. What if a civilization altered the orbit of asteroids or planets for engineering purposes? What if it created artificial satellites in vast numbers that could be detected as unusual patterns when a planet transits its star? What if they mined entire planets, leaving behind chemical scars that betray their activity? When scientists design searches for alien technology, they are often forced to think about how humanity appears from afar. What signals are we sending out unintentionally? How does Earth look to a distant observer? Our planet is already glowing with radio transmissions, orbiting satellites and signs of heavy industry. If a civilization like ours exists elsewhere, it might be making the same kind of noise across the void. The beauty of technosignature research is that it does not require aliens to deliberately reach out to us. They do not need to be trying to communicate. Their very existence could produce signals that we can detect if we are clever enough to look for them. And just as archaeologists on Earth uncover forgotten traces of past societies, astronomers may one day uncover the traces of civilizations that lived thousands or even millions of years ago. The search for biosignatures in alien atmospheres. When a planet passes in front of its star from our point of view, a tiny fraction of the starlight filters through the thin veil of its atmosphere before reaching our telescopes. In that short journey, atoms and molecules in the planet's skies leave fingerprints on the light. Certain colors are absorbed, leaving gaps in the spectrum that can reveal what the atmosphere is made of. This method, known as transmission spectroscopy, has become one of the most powerful tools in the hunt for life. A planet like Earth is tens of thousands of times dimmer than its star. Its atmosphere is only a razor-thin shell, and the signal it imprints on starlight is vanishingly small. Detecting those faint traces requires telescopes of extreme sensitivity, long observing times, and careful filtering to avoid mistaking the noise of our instruments for something real. Yet even with those challenges, we have begun to see results. The Hubble Space Telescope provided the first hints, spotting water vapor and clouds on giant exoplanets. The gases scientists are searching for are not chosen at random. Some, like oxygen, methane, and nitrous oxide, are strongly linked to life on Earth. The trick, however, is in interpretation. Oxygen might mean forests and plankton, but it might also come from a planet where sunlight splits water vapor and leaves the oxygen behind. Methane might point to microbes, but it might also be released by volcanoes or chemical reactions in deep rock layers. This is the problem of false positives. A planet may show a gas that excites scientists, but unless they can rule out non-biological explanations, the claim cannot be certain. That is why astronomers rarely look for a single gas in isolation. Instead, they search for a combination of gases that together are hard to explain without life. On Earth, oxygen and methane coexist in large amounts, even though they should quickly cancel each other out. Their persistence side by side is a strong biosignature. The search for biosignatures also depends heavily on the type of star the planet orbits. A planet around a red dwarf might show strange gases, but not because of life, rather because of the star's extreme behavior. In contrast, planets orbiting sun-like stars may be more stable, but they are harder to observe since their transits happen less often and produce weaker signals. Some researchers suggest looking for red edge signals, sharp jumps in the reflected light of a planet caused by vegetation. On Earth, plants strongly absorb visible light for photosynthesis but reflect infrared light. If an alien telescope were aimed at Earth, it might pick up that spectral edge as a sign of global greenery. Similarly, seasonal variations in atmospheric gases, like the way carbon dioxide rises and falls with the growth of forests each year, could serve as a telltale cycle of a living biosphere. Even with all these tools, the search will not yield easy answers. The first clear detection of oxygen or methane on a rocky exoplanet will spark debate rather than certainty. Scientists will argue over the possible non-biological explanations, weighing the data against models of planetary chemistry. It may take repeated observations across many different worlds before a consensus can form that we have truly spotted life. There is also the chance of discovering something completely unexpected. Life elsewhere might not follow the same chemical pathways as Earth. It might rely on molecules we have not thought to search for, or it might alter its atmosphere in ways that do not resemble our own biosphere. That is why scientists emphasize caution, but also curiosity. Every spectrum we gather is a lesson, each one showing the incredible diversity of planetary environments. A planet with sulfur-rich skies, a world shrouded in thick haze, a super-Earth with crushing air pressure. These may not host life as we know it, but they expand our understanding of what atmospheres can be. SETI 2.0, how AI and next-generation arrays could change everything. SETI is entering what some call its second era, driven by artificial intelligence and vast telescope networks that are finally catching up to the scale of the question being asked. Our galaxy alone has hundreds of billions of stars, many with planets. If even a fraction of them host life and even fewer host civilizations, the number of potential signals could still be enormous. But searching for them is like listening for a single voice in a stadium filled with billions of people. Early SETI programs could only tune into a few of those whispers at a time. It would take millions of years to listen to every star, every frequency, and every possible form of transmission. That mismatch between the vastness of the search and the limits of technology was one of SETI's biggest obstacles. The arrival of powerful computing has transformed what is possible. Modern arrays of radio telescopes, such as those being built or upgraded around the world, can now collect massive amounts of data. A single night of observation can generate more information than an entire year of SETI in the past. This flood of data would have been impossible to process with the old methods. But machine learning and new algorithms are changing the rules. Instead of humans painstakingly sorting through signals, computers can now scan billions of frequencies at once, flagging anything unusual, anything that doesn't look like the natural hum of the cosmos. The Allen Telescope Array in California is one example of this new approach. Designed to be used full-time for SETI, it has dozens of dishes working together, each capable of focusing on multiple targets. With AI-driven analysis, it can monitor many stars at once, looking for narrow-band signals that might betray technology. Similar efforts are planned with the Square Kilometre Array. Once completed, it will be the largest radio telescope on Earth, sensitive enough to pick up faint transmissions from thousands of light-years away. Unlike older telescopes, which had to choose between focusing on one target or sweeping broadly, these new instruments can do both, gathering unprecedented amounts of information across wide stretches of sky. One of the biggest challenges in SETI has always been interference. Earth itself is noisy. Radio stations, satellites, aircraft, even smartphones. All of these clutter the airwaves. Much of the time, a signal that looks unusual is just human-made noise bouncing around the atmosphere. Separating real cosmic signals from local interference has been like finding a needle in a haystack of static. Machine learning is now being trained to recognize the fingerprints of human technology and filter them out. The same way AI can distinguish a cat from a dog in millions of online photos, it can learn to separate earthly clutter from possible alien transmissions. AI also opens the door to searching for signals we don't know how to expect. For decades, SETI has largely focused on narrow-band radio, the kind of precise, focused signal that would stand out against natural background noise. But what if alien signals are wide-band, pulsed or coded in ways unfamiliar to us? Artificial intelligence can look for patterns beyond what humans might think to search for, spotting order where we would see only chaos. There is also the idea of looking at data collected for other purposes. Astronomical surveys now gather petabytes of information about stars, galaxies, and cosmic phenomena. Hidden in that data might be signals or patterns that went unnoticed because no one was looking for them. Projects like Breakthrough Listen are already using AI to re-examine archives of radio observations, giving new life to old data. In some ways, this mirrors how machine learning has been used in other sciences, like medicine or genetics, where AI finds patterns that human eyes missed. What makes this moment especially significant is the sheer scale of the upcoming tools. The Square Kilometre Array alone will produce more data than the entire internet used to consist of just a decade ago. Only artificial intelligence can keep up with that volume. SETI researchers no longer have to choose between depth and breadth. They can search deeper into space while also covering more stars and more frequencies than ever before. The search is no longer a narrow trickle of possibilities, but a flood. If AI is the one combing through the sky, will humans even recognize the discovery when it comes? It is possible that the first sign of intelligent life will not be a message anyone understands, but a pattern only a machine can see, a shift in frequency, a repetition in the noise, something subtle enough to slip past us, but clear to an algorithm. In a sense, we may be building machines to find alien machines, a kind of dialogue between technologies across the void. Even if the search remains silent, this second era has value. Algorithms for sorting signals also help in astronomy, where scientists sift through mountains of data to study fast radio bursts, pulsars, or gravitational waves. Optical SETI instruments may improve how we monitor the skies for dangerous asteroids or track satellites in orbit. The overlap between searching for aliens and understanding the universe is very strong. Yet the dream remains the same. Somewhere out there, perhaps, is a signal waiting to be heard. The difference now is that we finally have tools that match the scale of the universe. Where the first generation of SETI was like a fisherman casting a single line into a vast ocean, SETI 2.0 is more like setting out with a fleet, each equipped with nets, sensors, and eyes in every direction. We do not know what the ocean holds, but for the first time, we may be ready to listen at the scale the question deserves. The Great Filter. Are we the lucky ones who made it through? The idea of the Great Filter suggests that while life may begin in many places, almost all of it is stopped, blocked, or destroyed before it reaches a stage where it can spread through the galaxy. Somewhere along the ladder from simple chemistry to advanced civilizations, there are obstacles so deadly that most worlds never make it past them. And if this idea is true, then our existence as an advanced species could mean that we are the rare exceptions, survivors who somehow managed to step past dangers that kill almost everyone else. When scientists think about the Great Filter, they imagine a series of steps. First, a planet must be suitable for life. Then, simple molecules must organize into something that can copy itself. From there, basic life must grow into complex life. Complex life must form intelligence. Intelligence must build technology, and technology must avoid self-destruction long enough to spread beyond its world. Each one of these steps is not guaranteed. Each one could be the place where most life fails. If even one of those stages is incredibly unlikely or nearly impossible, it would explain why the universe feels so empty. Some believe the Great Filter is behind us. If this is true, then the hard part was simply getting to where we are now. Maybe the first cells were so unlikely to form that it almost never happens. Maybe the leap from single-celled organisms to complex creatures with tissues and organs was nearly impossible and we just got lucky. Maybe the appearance of intelligence, tool use, and eventually a species capable of shaping its environment was the rarest step of all. If that is the case, then our future could be bright. We've already passed the deadliest barrier, and what lies ahead may simply be the challenge of surviving ourselves and expanding outward. But what if the Great Filter is not behind us but ahead? That would mean civilizations do emerge, but they don't last. Perhaps they destroy themselves through war or environmental collapse. Perhaps advanced technology itself always becomes a trap, offering power so dangerous that no species can handle it. Or perhaps the danger comes from outside, a cosmic event like gamma-ray bursts or asteroid strikes that wipes out advanced life before it can travel far. In this version of the story, our silence is not because nobody else exists, but because they all destroyed themselves before they could spread. And if that is true, then we may be heading toward the same fate. We don't know where we stand. Every discovery about life on Earth and the universe around us changes how we think about the Great Filter. For example, the fact that life appeared quickly on Earth, almost as soon as the planet cooled enough for water, suggests that the first step may not be too rare. If life can begin easily, then the first barrier may not be the filter. But the leap to complex life took billions of years. If that step is rare, then maybe we are the winners of a cosmic lottery. Perhaps intelligence is a freak accident rather than an expected endpoint. Yet some argue the most likely filter lies in the future. They point to our own history. In less than a century of mastering nuclear energy, humans built weapons capable of ending our civilization in days. As we push deeper into genetic engineering, artificial intelligence, and planetary-scale industries, the risks only grow. Perhaps every civilization, when it reaches this stage, eventually creates something it cannot control. The very technologies that could carry us to the stars may be the ones that end us. Maybe the filter isn't one big wall, but a series of smaller walls, each one thinning out the possibilities. A world might get life, but that life never gets complex. Or complexity might appear, but intelligence never follows. Or intelligence rises, but the civilization falls apart before it learns to leave its world. Each step reduces the number of survivors, until finally, only a handful of species in the galaxy have even a chance of looking outward. And maybe right now, we are among the rare few who made it this far. The silence of the universe adds weight to this thought. If advanced civilizations were common and long-lived, we might expect the galaxy to be full of signs of their presence. Cities glowing on distant planets, giant engineering projects, or fleets of ships traveling between stars. Yet we see nothing. The absence itself may be the clearest evidence of the Great Filter at work. Somewhere along the path, the vast majority are stopped. If the filter is ahead, then we face challenges that could decide whether we survive or vanish like all the others. Some thinkers argue that this makes our choices in the coming centuries more important than any in history. The survival of our species, and perhaps the future of intelligent life in the universe, may depend on what we do next. Scientists, philosophers, and writers have all wrestled with the idea. Some see it as a warning against arrogance. Others see it as a call to action, to guard against self-destruction, to learn how to manage dangerous technologies, and to spread beyond Earth before it is too late. Colonizing other worlds could act as insurance against disasters. A species limited to a single planet is always one accident away from extinction. But a species spread across many worlds has a better chance of survival. Perhaps the Great Filter is real, but it is not absolute. Some species may fall, but not all. The galaxy may be dotted with survivors, each rare, each precious, each struggling with the same fears. In that case, silence does not mean emptiness, only distance and rarity. And if two survivors ever meet, it could be the most extraordinary moment in the history of the universe. Zoo hypothesis. Are we being watched but ignored? What if there are civilizations out there, aware of us, observing us, yet deliberately choosing not to interfere? This is the idea known as the zoo hypothesis. It suggests that perhaps the reason we have not detected alien life is not because it does not exist, but because it has chosen to leave us in isolation, much like how humans sometimes set aside protected reserves where animals are left to live without interference. The analogy to animals in a reserve is useful, but also raises questions. When humans place animals in reserves, it is usually to protect them from outside threats or to preserve their environment. If aliens are doing something similar with Earth, are they protecting us from themselves or from other cosmic dangers? Or perhaps they see themselves as caretakers of younger civilizations, ensuring that no outside influence disturbs our natural path. This would require not just immense technological power, but also a kind of moral or cultural code shared across multiple civilizations. It assumes that they value non-interference, at least up to a certain point. Of course, the idea also raises uncomfortable possibilities. If we are being observed, what exactly do they see? Our history is filled with wars, inequality, and environmental damage. Would they judge us as a species unready for contact? Would they decide that humanity needs to evolve further before being welcomed into a larger community? From this perspective, the zoo hypothesis casts alien civilizations not as indifferent, but as deeply watchful, weighing whether we are ready to be included in something greater. It gives the silence of the stars a new meaning. Not emptiness, but patience. Imagine multiple advanced civilizations spread across the galaxy. For the zoo hypothesis to hold, they would have to share the same policy of silence. This would mean some kind of coordination or agreement, a level of cosmic diplomacy that we can hardly imagine. It suggests a community of civilizations that is older and wiser than us, bound by a rule that says, "Do not disturb the young." If even one group decided to break the rule, we might already know of their existence. The fact that we do not might mean that the rule is nearly universal, or that the Watchers are simply that good at hiding. But how would such a thing be possible in practice? If alien civilizations exist with technology far beyond our own, they may have mastered ways to cloak their signals or hide their presence. Just as we can use camouflage to avoid being seen by animals, aliens could be using methods to remain invisible to our telescopes and detectors. They could even manipulate what we see of the stars themselves, ensuring that we do not pick up on their signs. To us, the sky looks natural, but in reality, it could be carefully controlled to prevent us from noticing anything unusual. For some scientists and thinkers, the zoo hypothesis feels unsatisfying because it cannot be easily tested. If aliens do not want us to know they are there, then by definition, it would be almost impossible to prove their existence until they decide otherwise. When we think about alien contact, we often imagine them coming to us, either to help or to harm. The zoo hypothesis suggests a more subtle picture. This reframes the search for extraterrestrial life into something more personal. Instead of just scanning for signals, we begin to wonder about our own readiness. If they are waiting for us to show maturity, what does that mean? Is it about ending global conflict? Is it about achieving technological stability, without destroying our planet? Or is it about reaching a point where we can engage in interstellar communication as equals? There is also the possibility that we are not simply being watched, but tested. What if the silence itself is part of an experiment? By leaving us isolated, they might be studying how a young species behaves without outside influence. Our choices, struggles, and progress could be data for a larger understanding of how civilizations develop. In this view, we are not just inhabitants of a reserve, we are subjects in a vast experiment, one that we do not even know we are participating in. Yet there is a hopeful side as well. If the zoo hypothesis is true, it means that civilizations can survive long enough to become advanced and widespread. It means that the galaxy might be full of life, but that life has chosen to wait until we are ready. In this way, the silence becomes less of a void and more of a promise. It suggests that one day, when we have proven ourselves, the silence may break. Contact would be deliberate and perhaps even celebratory, a recognition that humanity has grown enough to join a larger community. The dark forest hypothesis, silence as survival. In nature, many animals hide rather than announce themselves. A small creature in the grass does not sing out when a predator might be nearby. Even large and powerful animals avoid unnecessary risk by staying quiet unless they must act. In the same way, an advanced civilization in the galaxy may reason that revealing its location could be dangerous. They might assume that not every intelligence out there is friendly. They might think that some are hostile, or at least cautious enough to strike first when faced with the unknown. In such a universe, keeping silent could be the best survival strategy. One of the haunting implications of this dark forest hypothesis is that our own broadcasts may already have revealed us. For a century, humanity has been leaking radio and television signals into space. At first they were faint, barely strong enough to reach nearby stars. But as technology grew, some emissions became more powerful. Radar pulses, for example, sent out to map planets or detect asteroids, shine into the cosmos with enormous energy. They could be visible from many light years away. If others are listening, they may already know we exist. If a civilization fears threats, they may adopt what some call a shoot-first policy. In the forest, if you cannot tell whether a figure in the dark is friend or foe, you might assume danger and act before they can. On a cosmic scale, this means a civilization might strike against another before it grows too advanced, before it becomes a rival. Such preemptive action may seem cruel, but from the point of view of survival, it could be logical. A galaxy filled with such caution would not be a peaceful family of civilizations, but a place where silence and secrecy are the only guarantees of safety. Because of this, some have argued that we should continue listening, but avoid broadcasting. Others say it is already too late, since our signals have been escaping for decades. Still others claim that if the universe is truly as dangerous as the dark forest suggests, then perhaps survival was never guaranteed in the first place. To these people, reaching out is worth the risk, because otherwise we will never know who else is out there. Perhaps not all civilizations would think like this. Some might value cooperation, trade, or curiosity more than fear. On Earth, after all, humans have built societies where trust and exchange are possible, even across different cultures. If intelligent beings can reason and see the benefits of working together, they may choose a different path. But the dark forest hypothesis argues that even if most civilizations are peaceful, it only takes one aggressive one to make silence the safest policy. If you cannot know who is listening, the cost of speaking may be too high. This changes how we imagine first contact. Instead of expecting a friendly signal, a shared language, or a beacon welcoming us into the galactic community, the first sign of another intelligence might be destructive. A sudden strike from light years away, delivered without warning, could be how one civilization removes a possible rival. This grim possibility makes the silence around us more understandable, but also more unsettling. The metaphor of the forest highlights our own position. humanity is like a young creature wandering into a dark wood for the first time, unaware of the dangers, calling out loudly and shining lights into the trees. We have not yet decided whether to stay quiet or to keep speaking. We are learning, perhaps too late, that others, if they exist, might already know the rules of the forest, and if they do, then our naive noise may have already given us away. It is a sobering thought, one that casts a new light on the silence we hear. The limits of communication. Can we talk across the stars? From smoke signals to the telegraph, from the radio to the internet, each leap in communication has made our world feel smaller. We are used to instant replies, to the idea that a message can reach across the planet in seconds. But when we step into the scale of the stars, communication breaks down. The speed of light, which seems impossibly fast to us, becomes painfully slow when stretched across cosmic distances. A signal sent today to the nearest stars might not return for decades, or even centuries, depending on where it is aimed. Let us imagine that one day we do find a signal. Perhaps it is a repeating pulse hidden in radio noise, or a carefully shaped laser beam arriving at just the right frequency. Even if we are certain it is artificial, the first thought that comes is, what now? If we send a reply, how long before we hear back? Suppose the signal comes from a star system 500 light-years away. A reply would take 500 years to get there, and their answer would take another 500 years to come back. A full exchange of just 2 sentences would take 1,000 years. For all practical purposes, there can be no dialogue. Instead, contact would become more like exchanging letters across the rise and fall of civilizations. The people who sent the reply would be long gone before any answer returned. Civilizations might leave signals scattered across the galaxy like messages in bottles, never expecting a reply. They could encode their knowledge, history, or even warnings in beams of light or radio pulses, hoping that one day another intelligence will stumble across it. In this way, contact is more like an archive, a record waiting to be discovered. If we were to do the same, it would mean thinking not about what we want to say, but about what people thousands of years from now might need to hear. Even on Earth, communication across cultures can be hard. Symbols and meanings are not universal. Now imagine trying to create a message that another species, with different senses and ways of thinking, could decode. The famous Pioneer plaques and Voyager golden records were attempts to do this using simple diagrams, mathematics, and sounds of Earth to say who we are. But even those could be misunderstood. A circle to us might mean planet or star, but to another mind, it could be just a meaningless shape. Without the chance to quickly test and correct misunderstandings, it could take centuries just to clear up a small error. Then there is the issue of trust. When we speak across Earth, we can quickly clarify intentions. But in space, when a signal may take centuries to cross, uncertainty lingers. Was the message a greeting, a warning, or a trap? Even if it is harmless, by the time a reply is received, the civilization that sent it might no longer exist. A risk of misinterpretation will always hang over interstellar talk. Perhaps the safest course is to listen but never reply. Do we risk reaching out, or do we wait in the dark, hoping others do the same? Maybe we've already received messages but haven't recognized them. Because we expect signals in forms we understand, radio waves, lasers. We might miss other kinds of communication. What if a civilization uses particles we cannot yet detect, or encodes information in structures too subtle for us to notice? What if their idea of message is something we would not call communication at all? The time delay makes this problem worse, because we cannot ask for clarification. If we do not decode the first message correctly, there may never be a second chance. Technology could help us bridge some of these gaps. Advanced computing might one day allow us to simulate how alien minds could structure meaning, helping us find patterns hidden in noise. Quantum communication, though still theoretical, raises the hope of faster-than-light exchange, though most physicists believe it cannot truly break the light-speed barrier. Even so, some dream of finding loopholes in physics that might allow for near-instant connection across space. Until then, the limits are strict. the fastest signal we know, light, will always leave us waiting. We would need to build institutions, perhaps lasting for millennia, dedicated to waiting, interpreting, and sending replies. It is possible that entire new cultures would form around such work, with generations training to carry forward conversations that began long before they were born. Perhaps this is the lesson of cosmic communication, that our human way of thinking about conversation does not fit the universe. We want dialogue, but may never get it. The great distances and delays mean communication takes a different form, one that stretches across time as much as space. And if we are willing to think in centuries instead of seconds, the limits may not be limits at all, but simply the shape of the conversation the universe allows. Reaching an exoplanet civilization. Our fastest spacecraft today move at speeds that are extraordinary compared to human experience, but painfully slow compared to the distances of the cosmos. Voyager 1, the most distant human-made object, has been flying away from Earth for more than 4 decades. It travels at about 17 kilometers per second, which sounds breathtaking until you realize it would take more than 70,000 years to reach the nearest star, Proxima Centauri, just over 4 light-years away. Even our boldest missions, like the Parker Solar Probe, which holds the record for the fastest spacecraft ever built, barely scratch the surface of what's required. Its speed, boosted by the gravity of the Sun, is still nowhere near what would be needed to cross interstellar space within a human lifetime. This reveals a blunt truth. Our engines are designed for our solar system, not for the spaces between stars. Rockets, whether powered by chemical propellants or ion drives, are excellent for reaching Mars, Saturn, or even Pluto, but they were never meant for interstellar distances. The energy demands to accelerate even a small probe to a fraction of light speed are astronomical. To push a spacecraft the size of Voyager to just 10% the speed of light would require more energy than humanity produces in an entire year. And even if we could somehow manage that, the journey to the nearest star would still take 40 years, with no guarantee the craft would survive the harsh journey through cosmic dust and radiation. Space is unimaginably vast, and stars are not neatly packed close together. If our galaxy were shrunk down to the size of Earth, each star would be a grain of sand spaced kilometers apart. Sending a craft from one to the other means braving emptiness on a scale that is difficult for the human mind to grasp. Every kilometer per second gained in speed makes a difference, but reaching fractions of light speed is far beyond what chemical rockets could ever achieve. Scientists have proposed bold ideas for overcoming these barriers. Nuclear pulse propulsion, an idea tested in the mid-20th century, suggested propelling a spacecraft forward by detonating a series of nuclear explosions behind it. Theoretically, this could push a massive ship to about 10% of the speed of light. Projects like Orion and Daedalus explored this in detail, with designs for starships that could, at least on paper, reach nearby stars within a century. Yet the practical hurdles, from safety concerns to international treaties banning nuclear explosions in space, have left these concepts locked away in blueprints rather than reality. Instead of carrying fuel, a spacecraft could unfold a giant reflective sail and be pushed forward by lasers fired from Earth. The Breakthrough Starshot project is one such effort, proposing gram-sized probes that could be accelerated to 20% the speed of light using powerful ground-based lasers. If successful, these tiny craft could reach Proxima Centauri in about 20 years. But the lasers required would need to be immensely powerful and perfectly focused. The sails must be feather-light, yet durable against space dust, and transmitting useful data back across light years would stretch our communication technology to its limits. Even if we could solve propulsion, a spacecraft designed for such a journey must survive for decades or even centuries without human maintenance. Components would need to resist cosmic rays, micrometeorites, and the relentless cold of deep space. Power sources like nuclear batteries might run out, and even the smallest fault could doom the mission. And this is only for unmanned probes. Sending humans would be a challenge of a completely different order. A human crew on a centuries-long trip would require food, water, air, and shelter from radiation. Carrying these supplies in bulk is impossible, so concepts like generation ships have been proposed. These are vast vessels where entire communities would live and die over the course of the journey, with their descendants eventually reaching the destination. While inspiring, this idea raises social, biological, and ethical challenges that we are nowhere near solving. Another possibility is cryogenic sleep, where travelers could be frozen and awakened centuries later. Traveling across light years to a tiny target like an exoplanet also requires incredible navigation accuracy. Stars move, planets orbit, and gravitational influences from other bodies shift their paths. A slight miscalculation at launch could mean missing the destination entirely after decades or centuries of flight. And the idea of turning around or making course corrections at such speeds adds yet another layer of complexity. These barriers show why many scientists believe interstellar travel may remain forever beyond us, at least in terms of physically visiting alien civilizations. Instead, we may need to accept that our main connection will come through telescopes, signals, and indirect evidence. We might peer into alien skies and see the signatures of life in their atmospheres, or we might detect their radio signals, but reaching them in person could always remain a dream. Still, the human imagination does not give up easily. The history of exploration on Earth shows that what once seemed impossible can, over centuries, become routine. Flight was once thought unattainable, yet airplanes now cross oceans in hours. Reaching the moon once seemed fantastical, and now astronauts have walked upon it. Interstellar travel may seem hopeless today, but perhaps the distant future will prove otherwise. Concepts like matter-antimatter engines, warp drives, or ideas about harnessing the energy of black holes at least hint that physics itself may not completely forbid such feats. Until then, we remain stranded in our cosmic neighborhood. The stars may hold civilizations, but they are like voices calling from across an endless desert, too far to reach with our feet. If life is out there, it may remain forever mysterious, unreachable, and yet profoundly real. Are there other factors that make Earth a unique place for intelligence to emerge? What are the chances that intelligence is common throughout our galaxy? Send us your thoughts in the comments, and if you enjoyed the video, consider leaving a like and subscribing. Thanks for watching.